Welcome to the Parenting Conference at Catalina Foothills Church. My name's Rob Penley, and I'm glad to welcome you as this great opportunity that we have to learn and grow about God's grace for parents and how God changes parents as He helps them to parent their children. A couple of housekeeping items. If you're newer here, we're so glad that you're here. And the easiest way to tell you where the restrooms are is that they are out the door in the corner of this room. If you'll go out that door and take a left, you'll find the restrooms. There is coffee and water available just over there. Those two announcements are related. And so coffee, water, and then the restrooms are out that way. All right. John Cox is our speaker, and he's written a book called Setting Parents Free. And we're going to be giving away a few of these through the weekend. We don't have any for you to purchase on site, but there's this little startup company called, is it Amazon, that I think carries this book. So these two will be given away first to the parent of the youngest child. So if you think you have a pretty young child, raise your hand. That's one hand. How old is your child, sir? 3 months. Yes. How old is your child? 2 months. You're out. Do I hear 1 month? All right. 2 months. Going once. Going twice. Now this is what you can read at 3 a.m. Okay. And then we're going to set the upper limit at 20. If you are here and you have a child who, we're going to see who has the oldest child here. But if you got like a 40-year-old, that doesn't count. So, who thinks they may be the parent of one of the older children here? How old? That's above the line. We need something below. Remember, 20 is, there you go. Anybody have a 19-and-a-half-year-old? Okay, here you go. Then you're the winner of this one. All right, we'll give a couple away tomorrow. Categories yet to be determined. There was something else. Oh, can we show the slide about the follow-up project? We're going to have a great weekend together tonight and tomorrow morning, but it'll be a lot like the proverbial drinking from a fire hose. And what we've learned at Catalina Foothills Church is that it's good to sit with material for a while. So you'll hear great teaching, counting on you, great teaching tonight and tomorrow morning. And then in a few weeks, we can't do that right. We can't show it. I'm sorry. Look on the back of your handout. It's announcing 4 follow-up sessions that we're going to do. 4 Sunday nights in this room. We will provide you dinner and take care of your children and continue this conversation. There's a QR code if you want to register for that now. But you can just go ahead and know that that's out there, okay? All right, let's see. I think I've known John Cox for a long time, and John, we're thrilled to have you here. I wanted to say I'm excited to be here as a parent. I have 3 somewhat grown children, and I have been... I've received phone calls about president's lists and about getting arrested. I have visited them. I'm serious. I have visited them at the great moments, and I've visited them at low moments. And I think as I was reading over what John plans to talk about, God changes us as we raise our children. And it is by God's grace that our children learn to navigate in this world. In my family, when you tell us that you're going to counseling, we treat that like you're going to a personal trainer. Like that person really wants to get in good shape. That's how we see it. And so one of my children wrote me this week and said, had my first appointment with my new counselor, and they said I have daddy issues. What does that mean? They're our jokester. But in all seriousness, seeking to raise little humans into bigger humans is a challenge, and it is a marvelous challenge and joy, and it is hard, and God does some amazing things, not just through us in our children's lives, but but to us through our children's lives, if we're open to it and seeking that kind of growth. So I just want to commend you to be open-hearted tonight. I'm going to pray for John as he comes and begins. Lord, we pray that you would sustain and strengthen John. We thank you for the gifts and experience that you have given to him. We thank you for the work of your grace in his life. And we pray that as we sit and listen and partake and engage, that you would indeed set our hearts free, give us great confidence in you, great assurance in the strength of your work on behalf of our children. We're grateful to be here. Give us everything that we need for tonight. We thank you for John and pray your blessing on him. Give him joy in the midst of presenting. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, sir. And there will be Q&A at some point, and we'll get the microphones around to receive your questions. So thanks for being here, John.
Yeah, hopefully there'll be Q&A at lots of points. I'm so glad to be back here with y'all. I really had such a good time with y'all last year. It would have been last January. I had so much fun with y'all last year. I brought a few of my parenting books last year. And Debbie Graves created a little giveaway where she stuck little stickers on the back of some people's chairs. Did anybody remember that? Anyway, and whoever had the stickers got the book. I've still got those stickers on my iPad. I travel around with this doing conferences. It was such a good memory for me. Anyway, I'm glad to be back with y'all. And I applaud you all for being here on a Friday night on behalf of your children. Friday nights when I've worked all week and I want to get in my comfies and slap a steak on the grill, and you guys are here for your kids. I know that they appreciate it. A couple came up to me before a conference one year, and they said, we got to tell you, we were walking out, they had this like obnoxious teenage daughter, you know, and we were walking out the door, and she's like, oh my gosh, where are you guys going? And we said, we're going to a parenting conference. And she said, good. Anyway, so I'm sure they really appreciate y'all being here. I'm here in a little bit of a funny context in that I had COVID a couple of weeks ago, and though I'm over it, I still have the fatigue. You know how the fatigue kind of lasts? All right, so that's why I have a stool. And so if I start to kind of stumble, and my brain's still a little foggy, so we're going to do our best this weekend. But if you think about it, as you will soon hear, my model for parenting is not that your children need some sort of super great performance parent, a parent who does it all right and has it all together. That actually you being just a broken person who struggles and messes up and warts and all is really what your kids need. So I'm going to model that for you. I'm going to be a guy who's like a little off and my brain's a little fuzzy, and if I can't answer one of your questions, I'll ask you guys to help me out with it, and we'll do it. I'll show you what it's like to give to a community not in your best position. Norma and I, my wife and I, have been married 39 years coming up this spring. We have 3 kids who are in their 30s, and they're married, and we have 3 grandchildren now. So what I thought we would do this weekend is I have 600 or 800 slides of my grandchildren, and I thought we'd just go through them and do Q&A. I'll be glad to answer any of your questions, as we go along. But my kids always thought it was hysterical. Imagine this. Your dad is a parenting expert. Right. I invited them sometimes. My oldest actually did this once, but I invited them to attend a parenting conference. And aside from that one event, they refused, saying, we don't want to ruin your ministry, Dad. If people actually really met us. But I'm a clinical psychologist by trade, and I kind of do what you would think I would do. I have a couch and a pipe and a sweater, and basically, I do therapy all the time and write books and do conferences. But my therapy practice is kind of general, mostly adults, depression, anxiety, the usual, marital stuff, and parent consultation. I was trained in doing child therapy, but I found that if I could get a couple of parents on my treatment team, so to speak, that if I could get them thinking strategically with me, if I could get them doing the things that I was learning about their child in the play therapy, we could rock the Casbah, man. I mean, that we could do really great stuff in the life of kids. And so I more and more stopped doing child therapy and started doing parent consultation because it was like I had a live-in treatment team, which kind of led me to the whole issue of doing parent conferences and of writing the parenting book, because I think training parents to know what they're doing, to be strategic, to be heads up about what they're doing in their parenting is just this crazy good power source in the lives of kids. So that's what we're going to do this weekend. We're going to do two things overall. First, we're going to talk about what your kids need. The book is divided, and so will this conference be divided into 7 questions that basically I call the 7 questions parents are asking. Like in my 40 years of practice, what do they tend to ask? It also tends to parallel the things that kids really need. So one of the things I want us to talk about is, what do your kids really need? How do we teach them about love and discipline and forgiveness and God? And how do we keep bath time from turning into a dumpster fire? The basic, most important things, all right? Getting them to do what we say. We're going to spend a good part of the weekend doing that. But if that's all we did was me, the professional, telling you what your children need and how to provide it for them, then you're going to leave feeling terrible. Because if you're like most of the parents that I know, you will then turn that into a whole nother set of rules and perfect parenting that you better do just right or else. So secondly, what we got to talk about if we're going to do a good parenting conference is what to do when you screw it all up. Because if you're anything like me and you're trying to be a parent, you're going to screw it all up. And we got to stop making that scary. I mean, one of the reasons I call the book Setting Parents Free is because, I've met with so many parents, but everybody's biggest concern is, oh my gosh, what if we don't parent just right, all right? So these are our 2 goals. What do your kids need? To be whole adults. I mean, the goal is for them to be adults, right? The goal is to get rid of them. Let's just go ahead and make that plain here as we get started. And I want you really heads up about that. And number 2, we're going to talk a lot about failing as a parent, because I'm actually an expert on that, so I ought to be a good resource for you, So, we're going to look at all 7 questions in overview tonight. I want to fly over them all. Friday night at a parenting conference, I pushed you a little bit. And then we're going to break down and look at 2 of them in more detail tomorrow. We'll actually look at 3 or 4 of them in more detail tomorrow and do as much Q&A as we can. One more thing before we light this candle. Tell me more about y'all. Like, who has kids 0 to 4? Yeah, y'all always come to parenting conferences. 5 to 12? Okay. All right. 12 and over, teenagers. That's usually the most unrepresented group in a parenting conference, is the parents of teenagers. Y'all tell me at some point why that is. I don't know. But it's actually good because they're the toughest. So we won't get into too much of that, all right? Now, more than what? About 10 going on 25. Yeah, right, exactly. 10 going on 25. All right, the reason I want those hands is because I like to describe 3 different eras or 3 different seasons of parenting. I call them attending parenting and deparenting. There's actually a 4th phase, which is empty nest, which I call MLK parenting. Free at last, free at last. Anyway, we won't talk about that one because I don't want to rub it in. Anyway, the reason I want you to have these categories is because each of these stages, each of these sort of zones has kind of different rules, and there are different things you can accomplish. There are different things you can hope for. And I want to touch on each stage as we go through the weekend. For instance, attenders You know, infants, toddlers, preschoolers, you're not thinking probably at home a lot about teaching them, you know, about forgiveness and money management, right? You're trying to keep them alive and fed and not running out in the street and keep them from, you know, gnawing on the power couplings. But this is a very difficult time. We're back in it now, see, as grandparents. We have 4, 2, and 6 months. And Norma and I sometimes will keep these kids and we'll like return them to their parents and we'll just collapse. Like, how do they do this? And I talk to so many parents of attending age kids, and it's like, we don't need like parenting techniques. We need survival techniques. Like, there's this incessant, you know, you turn around. I turned around the other day and my 2-year-old was in the fireplace eating the rocks out of it. Like, where did they? I didn't read about that in a parenting book. I'm sorry. In developmental psych, that wasn't covered. You know, and you're sort of like, how do we survive this never-ending chase them across the Walmart parking lot existence, right? All right. Well, the bad news is that is actually what it is with attending. Your goals are to protect and provide and to manage, and it's very hands-on, and the rewards are low because the demands are so constant. So you're constantly in this position of like soothing their little freakouts or stopping them from throwing food or hitting their brother. But what I don't want you to miss as we go through this weekend is that another thing that's happening, especially for you attenders, you with the little bitties, is there's this kind of this exhausting constancy to it. But at the same time, during that age, those early years, you're building some fundamental motherboard software for some of the most beautiful basics that ever happen in the life of a human. You're teaching basics about love and trust and safety and frustration tolerance. And that's going on behind the scenes at the same time that you're like, oh my gosh, you got up last time, I have to get up this time. And you live that world. But one of the things I want to teach you is that what's going on underneath that exhaustion is something really, really rich. We'll talk about that. Second stage is parenting, and this is basically more straightforward textbook parenting. You're actually teaching them things, and they're developing the abilities to internalize it and grow and learn. You know, no dessert before supper. You go to timeout if you hit your brother. I'm going to help you with your homework and pitch baseball later. The basics of serious, like, you know, generic parenting. And then we go on to deparenting, which is where we should be with teens. And we'll talk some about this, especially tomorrow. But, you know, the rules change again. I mean, once you're parenting somebody whose job it is to get away from you, the job of the parenting shifts a little bit, okay? So I want to try to hit each of y'all in all of your stages as we go along. So we got 3 kind of stages. We got 7 questions. And I want to do an overview on that. Now, one of the reasons I want to do a big overview and give you all of the 7 questions tonight is because I have found that if parents can get a big picture sense of what they're doing and some categories for what is it that kids have to have, then what happens is it's going to make the daily junk a lot easier, I promise, if you have kind of a model in the back. So let's look at our 7 questions real quick, and then we'll get to cranking. Number 1, am I screwing up my kids? Surprisingly, the answer is no. I'm going to tell you why that's so, okay? Number 2, how do I help my kids feel loved? We're going to talk about this one in detail tomorrow. In other words, how do I help my kids develop that sense of security, of mattering, of knowing that who they are is loved and lovable, and that be a grounding in their life? That's going to be a big power source for the rest of their lives. It's a huge one. Number 3, how do I get my kids to do what I say? This one we're going to talk about tomorrow too. I mean, that's why you came, right? For the talk on how do I get my kids to do it. I can't jip you out of that one, right? So this is about discipline, obedience. God calls it wisdom. He calls it choose ye this day, all right? How do I get them to respect authority? Now, this is different from just doing what I say, okay? This is more about the heart. In other words, this isn't just doing what I tell you to do. This is how do we help our kids develop the heart ability to submit, okay? Hearts are going to be a big theme for us this weekend because we're Christians. And as we're looking at helping our children and as we're looking at giving to them and helping them grow, we're not just raising little robot obeyers here, though that might be nice every now and then, right? We're actually wanting to teach them more about how do you value authority? How do we help them bend the knee to authority, get off the throne in their own lives? Heart submission. That's a skill at a heart level that we need to teach them, and we're going to talk about how to do that tonight, in fact. Number 5, how do I help my kids learn to be strong? Okay, I just said we need to help them submit. Now we got to teach them to be strong too. Okay, this is a little like rubbing your head and patting your stomach. We want our kids to submit, right? But how are just the submissive people doing in life? I also want to be thinking about one of the things kids needing is how do I help them have a sense of self and be who they are and be strong and not live in that one-down child position in their lives, okay? This is power. There's more to life than just obeying. There's also the issue of what God calls steadfastness, all right? Next, how do I protect my children from pain? You don't. I'm sorry. The real question is, how do I help my kids learn to deal with pain? In other words, how do I best walk into the parts of my children's lives that are hurting and help them heal there? Okay? How do I help them develop the ability? And you're going to hear that phrase a lot this weekend, develop the ability to engage things that hurt or things that are full of loss or failure and keep their groundedness. How do we help them keep their poise there? God talks about this one a lot. He calls it humility, getting the log out of your eye, forgiveness, repentance. He goes on and on about them. And 7, how do we help our kids develop a relationship with God? In other words, how do we consciously nourish? What can we be doing to help them develop more of a relationship with God? All right? Now, those questions are kind of the background of the book. They're going to be our background this weekend. And I hope you are at least asking some of these questions, or I'm going to feel real dumb because it'd be like I'll be telling you something you don't want to know about. But we're going to talk about them anyway, all right? One of the reasons I want this overview, again, is that though I want to try to answer your particular questions about your kids, how do you get them to clean their room? I want more than that for you. Here's why. One of the things that I've found in working with parents for years is that most parents tend, because we aren't trained in how to parent and what kids need, most parents parent what I call reactively. In other words, they live sort of whack-a-mole with their kids' issues. Like, she won't do what we say, what do we do? He keeps hitting his brother, what do we do? And they're constantly in this reactive position against whatever the kid's kind of throwing at them next. Well, I want to give you a big picture, a big understanding of where kids are, how kids work, what kids need, the places in their lives where they need to grow, because I want you to have more than just a reactive way of living. I want you to have a proactive way of living. I want you to be able to approach your parenting heads up, strategic. I want you to have a map. I want you to have a grid. I want you to have an understanding of what's going on with kids so that you can kind of go to your Rolodex when, little Susie's having anxiety at night. Like, what could be going on here? Could this be an issue of security and love and attachment? Because that's one of Cox's categories. Is this an issue of emotional management? Is this an issue of helping her build strength? I want you to have categories so you actually can think about some of those hard calls with your parents. With your parenting. Though you can use it with your parents as well. I know that I need it with my parents sometimes. All right, let's punch it. Oh, one other thing. The other reason I want a big picture model for you is because it will help address the blind spots. I know that your children, like mine, each came out of the womb completely different. Like one of ours came out and she was like all cuddly and sweet and had the love thing down, like attachment and cuddles. She nailed that, but she was the one being picked on in the playground. We had to lean more in terms of helping build strength with her. Okay, I needed that category of strength. The other one came out all independent and ready to take on the world, and we needed to kind of lean more with her toward that issue of building love and attachment. That's another reason I want you to have the categories, because different kids will have different blind spots or different emphases will be needed, and I want you to have grids for that. Okay. Now let's punch it. Let's start asking and answering our questions. Am I screwing up my kids? We got to address this one first because it's kind of epidemic in our culture. When I deal with parents, and almost my entire careers I've dealt with parents. Let me put it this way. I never personally liked going to parenting conferences or reading parenting books. Myself. That's why I wrote a very different kind of parenting book. Because the reason I felt that way was because going to a parenting conference usually felt like going to my financial advisor, and basically he's like, yeah, I think you guys are fine. You just need to be putting aside another $5,000 a month, and I think you'll be good. And I'm like, oh God, I really wish I hadn't come, And you come to a parenting conference with some, Jake leg who sits up here and says, I'm going to give you 5 bullet points on how you're screwing up your kids. It's like, thanks, Doc. So goal number 1 is I don't want you to leave this conference or finish my book feeling more burdened. We live in an age of what I call psychological legalism. And heavens, I wrote this term in 1995, and think how much truer it is now. Since our culture's lost so much of its moral foundation, the new morality is now psychological. It's emotional. The worst thing you can do in our culture is sort of step on another person's toes or offend somebody, and it's kind of the new Puritanism. And it's actually more, legalistic and self-righteous than the Puritans ever thought about being. But as applied to parenting, it creates that anxiety parenting that I have seen my entire career. And that's that notion that parents live with that sort of says, oh my gosh, you better do everything right as a parent, or your children might grow up and be codependent or dysfunctional or have insecurities, or maybe they'll even, write a tell-all book about your family. And it's going to turn into a Lifetime movie called Family of Fear, starring Lindsay Wagner as you. It's going to be, and we live with this sort of fear of how our kids are going to turn out. So in the context of everything else I'm going to tell you, we're going to be talking a lot about what I know about what makes kids function best. In the context of all of that, goal number 1, just like the gospel, just like we did with our marriage stuff last year, just like the gospel, parenting has to begin with grace. It has to begin with some context that says, what do we do with our failure? Think about what the Bible does. The subtitle of my book is How to Give Your Kids What They Need and Where to Run When You Drop the Ball. Think about what the Bible does. It says, this is the way God wants you to live, and here's where to run when you drop the ball, all right? The Bible is basically about this is wisdom, and this is goodness, and this brings life, and guess what? You're going to screw it up. So here's where grace is. Here's where we run, all right? This is the reason it works, because fundamentally, parenting is not a performance, it's a relationship. So I started off today saying my performance is off this weekend. You're just going to have to deal with just John, broken and half-witted as I am. Parenting is the same way. It is fundamentally a relationship, not a performance. okay? Now, it is a relationship, albeit with people who take your money and throw up on you and tell you you're not fair all the time. But it's a relationship nonetheless, right? Okay? Now, what happens in relationships when we screw up? You guys, who was here for marriage last year? Yay! What do we do in our marriages when we screw up, hopefully? We swing back in. We try to love, and then we fail, and then we swing back in and repair it. And we're going to do that with our kids too. This is a relationship, not a performance. In other words, I am not here this weekend to teach you how to become a better parent. This is not a parenting advice seminar. I'm here to teach you how to create something great with your kids. All right? And that means a bunch of fallen people who don't do it right and who mess it up together. And you live together with your kids. Fallen people who try to love and you screw it up and then you repair it. That's what makes great kids. That's the secret of the universe. It's for us to give up this, if only Cox teaches you how to parent right, your kids are going to be great. No, what your kids need is you. I want to teach you how to be you as a parent. And when they get that, guess what? They're getting great parenting. That's going to be our background all weekend. Fun thing is that the research backs this up. There was a guy in the 20th century named D.W. Winnicott who did longitudinal studies on child development. And he watched parents and he studied how they parented. And he watched them through the lifespan. And then he watched how the kids turned out, like when they grew up. He lived a long time. So by the 60s or so, these kids were adults, all right? And so he goes and he tries to find the kids who had by his, research design, perfect parents, like what they were like as adults. And they were weirdos. So he's like, well, that's puzzling because they had perfect parents. But actually, it's not if you think about it. How would you like to have perfect parents? So then he goes and he tries to find the kids who turned out to be the coolest adults. And he found them. They were cool, high-functioning, neat people. And he went back and checked on their parents, and he found nothing noteworthy. They were just these people. They loved their kids, and they screwed it up. And they repaired it when they screwed it up. And he called that good enough parenting. It's in the literature. Good enough. Here's our mantra. We're going to say it all weekend long, and that it's the defining principle of parenting and the background of everything we're going to try to do to help you become a better parent. It's this, and I want you to get your grandmother to needle point it and put it over the cupboard in your kitchen, all right? And it's this. The only thing better than a perfect parent is a humble parent. Think you can do that? A parent who can have a relationship with his kids and mess it up and repair it. And that's great news, not just for us, but for our kids too. Because I'll tell you this, Winnicott didn't come up with good enough parenting because he wanted to make parents feel better about themselves. Don't worry, all you got to be is good enough. That's not why he came up with it. He came up with it because he was trying to learn what was best for children. In other words, the good enough model is not so you don't have to worry. The good enough model is what your kids really need. It also just happens to make you not worry. It's a floor cleaner and a dessert topping. The best shine you ever tasted. Who knows that? Who's old enough to know that reference? Where's it from? Saturday Night Live, the old Chevy Chase. It's a floor cleaner. No, it's a dessert topping. It's both. The best shine you ever tasted. Anyway, we can still be friends even though you don't get that, okay? Google it for me, though. That'll be your assignment for in the morning, okay? But here's the bottom line. Secret of the Universe, number 38 and a half. For some reason, God made things in such a way that when love is imperfect, when love fails, when it drops the ball, when it messes up, and then it's repaired, it makes love better. I call it the grace effect. See if I have that in here somewhere. No. It's in here somewhere. We'll get to it. The grace effect is a term I gave to something. It's like when grace rules, when humility rules, when God rules, when love rules, then when I mess up and I can repair it, it makes our relationship better. Think about our marriage. I mess up and you call me out on it instead of being defensive and being a jerk. I say, you're right. That really did hurt you, didn't I? That makes love better. God made that up, all right? So this is where we're beginning our parenting, all right? I want you to have that context. Number 2, how do I help my kids feel loved? Oh, this is where we're going to talk about the grace effect in a minute. We'll talk about it again. Now that we've done some background of grace and safety, let's go to work. We're going to do a whole talk on this one tomorrow, so I'm going to be a little bit brief, but how do we teach our kids about love? Now, when I say that, I don't mean like, who loves you, baby, moosh, moopy, schmoopy, okay? I mean, that's fine, do that, but I'm talking about something a little more core than that, okay? A little more operating system than that. What I'm referring to is the kind of love that God created us humans to need to sort of ground us and sustain us. In other words, we're made in such a way, and this is a fundamental piece for dealing with adult psychopathology, for instance. If we talk about depression or anxiety, this is one of the principles we look at. God created us to need to live grounded in a sense of being loved and known and matter, and I have that inside that John has those things. And I live with that, with myself and with him and with others. And it forms sort of this battery pack for me to sustain me. Even if you don't like me, or even if I've failed, or even if there's a lot at stake, I still feel grounded in that. In other words, kind of the opposite of insecure, so to speak, all right? So how do we teach this? One of the things we'll say tomorrow is we don't teach it by coddling. In other words, give your kids anything they want and they'll feel loved. That actually backfires. They'll feel less loved because what you've taught them is not love but entitlement. Anyway, it's not about approval and praise. Oh my gosh, look at you, look at you. You ride your bike like an Olympian. You are the special snowflake. That doesn't create love. That's just adoration. So how do we teach them about love? What we'll talk about tomorrow is that the bottom line of teaching grounding love is going to come down to something this basic. Relating to our kids in such a way that says, you know, what's important to you, what it feels like to be you, what's hurting for you matters to me. The word love and the word mattering are so interchangeable when it gets down to the experience of relationship. And we can go back to our marriage conference last year and say the same thing. Do I matter to you? The sense of being gotten, that you get it, feels so close to the feeling of being loved that they're almost indistinguishable. I would tell you that in a marriage conference. I probably did last year, but I'm going to tell it to you again in a parenting conference. And that is, hey, kid, I'm going to teach you about love. What that means is who you are, what you think about, what you feel. I try it on. I engage it. I don't discount it. I let it matter. All right? Now, we're going to do that in 2 ways tomorrow. We're going to tell them and we're going to show them. Isn't this fun? This is easy stuff, right? First, we're going to tell them, before we get all psychological and sophisticated about, building love categories, we're going to just tell them we love them, all right? I want you to take their face in your hands, and I want you to say, do you know how happy you make me? I want you to look them in the eye and say, you delight me. One of the things that we'll say tomorrow, and again, this is applying to your marriage. Those of you who didn't come to the marriage conference last year, kind of getting one right now. I'm throwing it in for free, all right? One of the things we'll say tomorrow is that one of the most powerful ways that you communicate love to someone else is to talk to them about how they affect you. Husbands, please write this down, all right? In other words, like my 2-year-old, Shaw, he loves to read. Y'all got a 2-year-old who reads, put the book in their lap, and they're like, ma, 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 ma. Anyway, I could watch that all day long, okay? So I tell him that. I love watching you read to me. I love your stories, all right? I'm telling him how he affects me. This is just like, fine, tell him you love him, but that's kind of a one-trick pony, right? I'm going a little deeper here. I'm going to tell you how you affect me. I love watching you. Now, furthermore, tomorrow we'll talk about how the most powerful way we engage them about love is we're going to show them. Another secret of the universe. Loving somebody and living lovingly with them are two different things, okay? And living lovingly, doing love with somebody well is the most important of the two, okay? In other words, I've always loved plants. But for years, I would buy a beautiful plant from my office, and I would take it back to my office, and I would promptly kill it. Now, did I want to? No, I loved that plant. But I would go back and buy another plant, and other plants are like, he's back, It's like dead man walking, I loved plants. I didn't know how to love them. And I have depressed clients who will tell me all the time, I know my parents loved me. And they did. But they didn't know a lot about what doing love looked like, okay? We're going to spend some time tomorrow talking about what showing love and acting lovingly looks like. And it's really not going to be that complicated. I'm hoping that you're learning by now. My goal has been to turn all the complicated stuff about child development into something that's approachable, something that's not so complicated. Doing love, showing love, acting lovingly to our kids is really not that different from doing love with other people. Think about it. How do you love other people? You guys don't need a parenting conference. Send me home. What do? We try on what it's like to be them and we let it matter. All right? That's everybody's love language. Your wife says, the kids are driving me crazy. Jerky me says, well, you ought to try doing my job someday. Blah, 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 okay? Loving me is going to stop and try it on. Remember, being gotten is as close to being loved as for them to be indistinguishable. But I want to say to her, the times when you go out of town and leave me with the children, those times that I say I'm glad to babysit? Y'all know that phrase. Sure, honey, I'll babysit. Wives, you like that phrase? Okay, good. I wanted more of a reaction from you. That's the worst thing you can say, guys, right? I'll be glad to babysit. Anyway, instead we say, yeah, it's so incessant, babe, of course. I don't know how you do it. You must want to pull your hair out. I'm getting her. I'm trying it on. That's love, right? The greatest psychologist said, love your neighbor as yourself, okay? That's what doing love looks like. So same with your kids. We try on their little world. What would it be like to be your kids? I actually think they have it made, but, but think about it. What if you live with 3 people who are 3 times taller than you? If you live with 2 18-foot giants, what would that be like? And one of them cooked your food and the other one made you eat it, Anyway, we're going to talk more about what that sounds like tomorrow. And it's different at different ages. Different ages have different love languages, so to speak, okay? Infant, toddler, school age, teen. We'll sort of try to find the love language for these guys, all right? But think about it. You get to teach your kids about love. Love's kind of a big deal. And you guys get to be the brokers of that in the lives of your children. That's cool. All right. Before we leave this whole topic of love, remember, This is not a go be a better parent conference. So, loving your kids is great, right? But what if you're more like me? What if you drop the ball all the time? What if you're a jerk? What if you've had a hard day at work and your kids need you and you just go off on them? Or you turn around and that 4-year-old's walking out from the refrigerator with the whole gallon of milk like this, which they then proceed to drop, and you blow up. How do you show love now, Mr. Psychologist, okay? Right? Well, let's start applying our freedom that we started out with. The only thing better than a perfect parent is a humble parent. So what do? You swing back in. You say, whoa, 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 whoa. That was, God, I'm sorry, that was mean, and I yelled at you, and that would be scary, and I treated you like you didn't matter at all just because I've had a hard day at work, and I dumped it on you. Come here, buddy. Come here. I need to ask your forgiveness. I didn't handle that well at all. Now look what you've done, guys. You've turned a total screw up into an opportunity for the best kind, the most precious kind of intimacy and humility and, yes, love, which is the very love and mattering that we're talking about. In other words, mischief managed. God's strength made perfect in weakness. And you win and your child wins because you screwed up. And you brought that screw up in a loving way. That's the best kind of love there is, okay? This is the grace effect. That God invented this. God invented something that says, when you screw up, when you're fallen, who loves the best? When Jesus talks about the people he encounters, who loves the best? The worst sinners. Why? Because they see how much they need him. Who's the best parent? The one who knows they screw up. The one who knows they need forgiveness. These are the same principle. The grace effect. When God rules, when humility rules, our screwed upness can make relationship better. You can't buy that stuff, friends. Number 3, how do I get my kids to do what I say? We're going to talk about this one a whole session tomorrow. But this one's about discipline, obedience, responsibility, wisdom. So I'm going to be a little skimmy since we're talking about this tomorrow. But how do we get some good, strong kung fu in our discipline? Well, there's a sense in which we could say that the fundamental question that all children are asking is something like this. Why can't I just do anything I want? Why do I have to do what you say? And we're going to talk tomorrow about how most of us as parents tend to address those questions in one of 2 lame methods. I call them coddling and control. Coddling is kind of where we beg and persuade. That's when they'll do this with the kids. Hey, come on, amigo. We talked about this, didn't we? You already do that one, Because, I want us to stay friends and everything, But that doesn't work very well. So most of us then will switcheroo into some kind of a control, and we try to force them or make them. And we say things like, I'm sick of, blah, 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 blah. And now, all parents have some trouble with that whole control thing and having much success with control. Those of you who have teenagers know that it turns into a dumpster fire real quick. And I think it would be great if our kids just did what we said when we said so because we said so, but they're not, okay? This is earth. Welcome, all right? That's not how it works here, all right? So we can't coddle them into obeying, and we can't make them obey, and so we're going to have to unpack this tomorrow. But here's the secret nobody talks about that we're going to develop, and that is that kids aren't born with the ability to obey. It's not like they came out of the womb with this ability to do what you say, and by golly, they're just not willing to do it. They aren't born with the ability to bend the knee and to submit and to make wise choices and to choose well and to do what you say, any more than they are born with the ability to understand trust or forgiveness or emotional management or how to do their taxes. It's a big learning curve when you were a kid, okay? Kids don't know how to obey. So we're going to have to do something really wacky, guys. We're going to have to teach them, okay? In fact, we're going to do so much teaching about how to obey and what obeying looks like that we're going to call this method teaching discipline. And we'll unpack it tomorrow. But let me give you a little example just to kind of whet your appetite and give you a sense as to where we're going. Think about what usually happens. Number one, you tell them to do something. Billy, stop bugging your brother at the dinner table. In other words, we issue a command. Now, what's going to happen next? Hashtag not first rodeo. All right? Billy's going to wait 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, and then he's going to bug his brother again, right? I mean, right? Who wouldn't? He's sitting right there. For crying out loud. Could you resist hitting him again? Now, part of the reason Billy does that is because Billy's a little terrorist, and I'll grant that, all right? That's, okay. But the other reason that Billy's going to do this is because all you've done so far, boys and girls, is issue a command. And we'll talk tomorrow about how commands sound commanding, but they don't actually have a lot of power. If you want real power here, if you want to begin teaching Billy what it looks like and sounds like to obey you, then the next step is not just to issue a louder command, okay? Billy, I told you to not hit your brother, and that's final. And Billy wishes it was final, but it's not. But if you want real power here with Billy, you got to get this secret of the universe. And that is the only way a child learns to make better choices is when they experience an event based on the choices. Okay? Read the news. Children are concrete thinkers. Hello, Piaget. You guys had intro to psychology, right? That's why Sesame Street doesn't talk about the concept of threeness. Sesame Street talks about 1, 2, 3, cookie. All right, now why does it do that? Because children are concrete thinkers, all right? So what do they learn from? Lots of words? Lots of verbose nagging and persuasion? No, they only learn through concrete things. Children learn through events. So, with our young friend Billy and his brother, we've got to create an event, something experiential, something concrete, something more along the lines of, Billy, if you bug your brother again, then, and we're going to create an if-then about an event that's going to take place for Billy. Now, what's happened once you've done that is you've tied up in a nice little bow with Christmas wrapping a bright, shiny, sparkling event, just waiting for Billy to unwrap it in a moment when he hits his brother again. And when he bugs his brother next, we're not going to nag and we're not going to count and we're not going to throw down. We're just going to follow through with that promise we made about the event. We're going to get up and we're going to say, Billy, if you hit your brother again, I'm going to take your dinner and I'm going to put it in the kitchen until everybody else is finished. Or, Billy, if you hit your brother, I'm going to escort you to timeout. Or, Billy, if you hit your brother, I'm going to take your iPad, whatever like that, all right? Now, when he does act up, we're going to follow through with this event, all right? Now, of course, at that point, Billy's going to have a tantrum and throw a fit, and we'll talk about how to manage that, all right? But I just want to give you the big theme right here. But what's happened is you've changed your chemistry. You've changed this conflict from you versus Billy to Billy versus an event that's going to happen to him. And you'll be really surprised and thank me one day as to how that's going to change dynamics. Because Billy is now learning. He is learning that this isn't a me versus dad event anymore. Dad don't have a dog in this fight. I can bug my brother all I want. I just lose my iPad. I can bug my brother all I want. I'm just going to lose my dinner. All right? Something is happening to me, an experience, an event. This is the only place that irresponsible people learn, regardless of their age. It's why alcoholics go to treatment. The only thing that changes an out-of-control behavior is an event, okay? So, as we'll talk tomorrow, a lot of disobedience in kids is actually because all they're dealing with is back and forth words. Stop doing that. No. I said stop doing that. No. And that's all that's happening there and never an event. Okay? Now, you attenders, you're going, yeah, right. My 2-year-old has a limp-legged meltdown every time I try to keep him from, playing with the lawnmower. Why is it, by the way, let's have a group discussion about this. Why is it that a toddler, when they want to and you're holding them, can become heavier? How does that work? Like the physical mass index of them gets heavier. And it's like, how does that, anybody has any thoughts on that, let me know. Because I want like a MIT physicist to explain it to me. But anyway, you're like, we're having limp-legged meltdowns. I was trying to get my 4-year-old to not drink out of a Coke held straight up like this where it was running all over his face. He's screaming. It's all over the floor. Great. Use your parenting principles, Dr. Cox. I'm feeling like, what am I supposed to do? Okay. I feel your pain. I hear your pain. I live your pain now. Do know that with littles, we'll tweak this more tomorrow. They don't really even get cause and effect in choosing an events until 18 months or so because their little brains aren't developed that much. So we can't do full-on teaching discipline yet, but we can start by helping them develop some cause and effect ideas. A mother told me the other day, she looked and her toddler was walking toward the electrical plate on the wall with a pair of tweezers. Okay, now I don't think that's the time to stop and go, Sally, if you stick the tweezers, let me create an if-then event for you. No, with little, sometimes you're just going to grab and restrain, okay? Though I don't think it's fair that they make those things look like little faces. I think that, it makes it harder. Kids can't resist that. Anyway. So we're going to have to use other forms of intervention with littles, but they will start developing the principle, okay? They slap you. I want to put them in a little playpen time. We're starting to develop that if-then cause-effect theme for littles, okay? So 6-year-old Sally won't put her pajamas on. We used to put ours in the bathroom and say, your pajamas are in the bathroom until y'all want to come out together. That can be 3 minutes. That could be 30 minutes. No dog in that fight, okay? But we need experiences. Teenagers, will talk more tomorrow about integrating the teenage junk into it because you can't discipline a teenager the same way you do a 8-year-old, all right? But teaching discipline. We teach it with events. We don't just require it, all right? By the way, think about it. One of the reasons that I'm doing this and talking about discipline that way is because that's the way adult life works. And remember, we are trying to get them ready for adulthood. This isn't about just making your life tomorrow easier. That's a major priority. In adult life, why do we make the choices we make? Because of the consequences of those choices. We're teaching a principle, hopefully, that's not just going to put them in a better place to make choices now, but will put them in a place to make better choices as adults, all right? By the way, notice what we've got here so far is what I consider to be the two most fundamental parts of parenting. You could boil all of parenting down to these two things, love and limits. God's big on these. He calls them grace and truth, peace and righteousness, Mary and Martha, The dynamic of I'm going to be tender to you and warm to you and comforting to you and loving to you. And there's limits and ways of living that are destructive versus life-giving. Think how much God lives that way. Think how much we sometimes struggle with pulling those into the same room for him. But he's like, I am the Lord your God who led you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. I brought you on eagle's wings. Next line, you shall have no other gods before me. And he goes back and forth in these. I just want you to see that. By the way, what is it? Psalm 85 talks about how in the person of Christ, in the person of God, in his kingdom, peace and righteousness, love and limits, kiss. All right, next question. How do I get my kids to respect my authority? I think we'll do this one and then take a little break. Yep. In other words, the ability to submit. As I said earlier when we were just going through them, this one's deeper than just obeying. This is more about their hearts. I believe that core to a Christian view of parenting is that we've got to ask for more, try to create more than just making our children act right or do what we say. What we're working on forging here as parents who are Christians is whole hearts. We're not just parenting, we're sanctifying. And I want us to have at least consciousness of the ways in which our relationship with our children is going to bring them greater Christ-likeness, all right? So we've basically got our work cut out for us. I mean, basic principle in the Bible is that we're all born and basically hold a board meeting and elect ourselves chairman, right? Because, we all kind of want to run things. And as regards to your parenting, here's the news flash. Your children are not actual willing participants in this process. It's not like they came to you and knocked on your door one day with a contract and said, yeah, I'm this irresponsible, selfish, self-centered little person, and I need somebody who will help me become strong and humble and wise and selfless. Would you be interested in being my sponsor? That's not what happened. They don't want what we're selling, I mean, have you ever met a selfless kid? It's like, hey, Dad, all I've done is giving you hassle today, so I'm going to do this the first time you ask. Put your feet up. So what do we need to do? We got these kids who, like us, are born sort of oriented toward being one up. We want to run everything. And somehow we've got to teach them submission. I tell parents sometimes that, part of parenting is helping your kids learn to grow up. In other words, be mature, be wise, make good choices, handle things like that. But another part of our parenting is what I call helping your children learn to grow down. And that is helping them learn the ability to bend the knee and to get off the throne in their life and to develop a submissive heart to you and God. So how do we engage kids' hearts in such a way to help them value authority? I could make this easier, couldn't I? These are hard questions. How do you help your children develop the ability to value authority to where David gets to the point at some point in his life where he can write, I love thy law? My 8-year-old said that just the other day, right? Yeah. So how do we do that? Well, like love and like obedience, guess what? We teach submission. We're building an operating system here. We're building the categories and the capacities that God created us to need in order to make life work. That's what this kind of parenting is about. Those of you who are at the marriage conference, remember we talked about the 4 I's. Can I let you in? Can I keep you in? Can I be me? Can I let you be you? In other words, those were themes of character abilities in my software that I bring to my marriage. All we're doing this year is we're backing up and saying, how can we best help our kids develop those character abilities in our parenting? I just want you heads up on how to do that, okay? But we have to teach submission like we teach anything else. A lot of authoritarian kind of parents act like submission is this thing we just sort of require and expect out of children, that they should submit to us. And this is really big in a lot of Christian parenting books. Like there's this 4-year-old walking around with this incredibly sophisticated capacity to bend the knee to you, and by golly, they just won't do it. And we're like, well, when I was a kid, all my parents had to say was jump, and which is why we're all in therapy, okay? So hear me here. Submission is not this thing to acquire. It's a capacity of the heart that we need to teach, okay? It's one of the reasons we got to be really careful of the do it 'cause I said so types. A child having the ability to do it because I said so is actually the end result of a lot of development and a lot of cool learning and richness, not a baseline to begin with, not something just to begin requiring. And besides, to most kids, and I've had kids tell me this, because I said so, sounds to all the world like, because I feel like it, because I'm big and you're little, because I win and you don't. And God never says, because I say so. He says, do this that you may live. Don't do this or you'll die. Do this and your life will be rich. In other words, he teaches with an event, by the way. What's the 5th commandment? And Paul says the only commandment with a promise, the only commandment that has an event promised embedded in it. Children, obey your parents. Why? That your days may be. God is saying, I'm going to put an actual practical event in the one that I've given to children, because children think practically. So how do we teach submission? Here's a quickie little way to look at it. Though this is very nuanced, here's a little hook to hang your hat on. We teach submission by lovingly disappointing. These 2 words, both of which are very important here. We lovingly disappoint. So number 1, yes, we do disappoint them. Step 1, for somebody to learn to submit, someone does have to alpha them, okay? A lot of our culture of parents, y'all's generation and my generation of parents, we live in this position of overcare to our children. You know, always giving them, trying to make sure they have everything they need and are, not disappointed. And, what is thy bidding, my master? Norm and I joke that we went through a long season in our parenting in which we thought we could teach servanthood to our children by modeling it. You got it. Like maybe they would see us serving them and think, ooh, being a servant's cool. No, they were just like, garçon, it's like this works great, They serve us and we get, Anyway, so step 1 is somebody does have to stand their ground and teach them that, they can't have everything they want. They don't run things, all right? Basically, your children will treat you like a box of cookies. If you give them 1 cookie, they'll eat it. If you give them 5 cookies, they'll eat them. If you leave them in front of the TV with the box of cookies, there'll be just crumbs and junk all over the floor, and you'll be a desiccated skeleton in the other room, and that's what'll happen. And this will all happen because children are born with the disease I call entitlement. And that is they feel like you and the world and everybody kind of owes them unless we alpha them, okay? Those of you teenagers know they have a word for entitlement. I'm not exactly sure how you spell it, but it goes like this. So I don't... Yeah, the teenage parents are laughing, right? How do you spell that? But it says everything, doesn't it? Like how dare you not give moi what moi wants, So we have to disappoint. Now, secondly, we got to do it lovingly. If you want to change their hearts. In other words, here's the secret. Why is submitting hard? You don't like submitting. Wives, we talk about Christian marriage and wives submitting. Do you like that idea? Why is it hard to submit? Why is it hard for your teenager to bend the knee to you? Why is it hard to to bend the knee and not get what I want because I have to submit to you. I believe it's because you win and I lose. I believe it's because submission is so easily feels humiliating. You matter and I don't. You win and I lose. Now, nobody's going to do that. That's why your teenager would rather swallow a meteorite than bend the knee to you sometime. All right? We're called to submit, but submission can so easily become humiliating. And you feel like a stupid little loser who doesn't win, but they win and you lose. And that humiliation gets in the way of being able to submit. And that's so much of what's happening with your children. So somehow we've got to help them over the hump of that humiliation. So what heals that humiliation of having to bend the knee? And if they don't heal it, they may learn to do what you say, but they won't heart learn. I believe that what heals it is that we, their parents, live under authority too, and we get it. In other words, sometimes we lose too. And doesn't it stink? Think about it. You're under authority all the time. You have to bend the knee, right? You got to pay your taxes. You got to go in when the boss calls you, even if you don't want to. You got a detour on the interstate when they're rebuilding that bridge, even though you're going to be late. Don't you hate submitting? I just was spent part of the day at the airport yesterday. You can watch people hate submitting at the airport. It's like, I'm sorry, your flight's delayed. What? You know, and this guy's like 5 years old emotionally. It's like, dude, come on. Don't you hate that? It doesn't matter whether you like it or not. So to prepare our kids' hearts to learn to submit, we say two things to our children about submission. We lovingly disappoint. We say, number one, yeah, I'm over you and you got to do the stuff I say, or your lifestyle around here may really change a good bit. But number two, I'm also someone who's under authority too. And doesn't it stink? I get it. It's hard. We lovingly disappoint. And that empathy, remember what I told you about what getting it feels so much like love? That getting it takes the sting of humiliation out of submission, so now our kids can do it. It's what heals their heart to be able to bend the knee at the heart level, not just at the behavioral level, okay? So you attenders, maybe you're just carrying that little one out of the toy section at Walmart and they're kicking and screaming because they don't want to leave. And you just add, I know, baby, I know it is so hard to have to leave and you're in the middle of playing and we were having such fun and now we got to go home and now I'm dragging you out. And you don't realize it, but what you're doing is you're acknowledging with them the pain of submission. You're lovingly disappointing. I know what it's like to not get what you want, and someone is in there with them. With parenting age, with de-parenting age, I remember one of mine, it was 1993 because Clinton had just gotten elected, and all my taxes had changed. And she whirled around at me one night and said, "This is just stupid. I mean, you just get to make up rules, and we have to follow them." And there's part of me that wanted to go, bing, it can learn. Yes, exactly. Thank you. I've been trying to get this point across. But I just been, yes, ma'am?
What about trust? To me, when you say, I feel, what about before there's embarrassment or submission? I mean, how about if they just don't trust you?
Can I get to that later?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
If that's part of it, then it makes sense.
I'll try to come back to it. Your question is, how do you help build trust if trust is not there?
I don't see how trust isn't the first step.
Ah.
I don't see how that's not the first step. So when you say go right to relating to being told what to do, to me that doesn't, like, I think I could submit easier than trust.
Okay, so let's play with this. How do you build trust?
I don't know. I mean,
Exactly. So the way you build trust is by doing love. In other words, if I want my child to trust me, that the things I'm coming up with, that I'm telling them to do, have validity and legitimacy, I have got to start with something that speaks their language. In other words, a lot of times people will say, yeah, you're talking a lot about discipline based on choices and consequences. What about just doing it because you're the authority and they should submit? Or what about doing it just because they trust you? Well, because the notion of do this just because you trust me has to get built just like everything else. So if I'm going to teach you, you can trust me, then when you say, I disagree with you, I don't think what you want is legit, I refuse to do what you say. If I'm really trustworthy, I'm going to say, let me tell you what I'll do if I'm not trustworthy. I'll say, oh, yes, you are. Because I'm your parent and you need to trust me and you get over there and do it. If I am trustworthy, I'm going to go, yeah, I totally get how you don't want to do that. That makes total sense to me because there's so many things I don't want to do. In other words, I'm going to join them. I'm going to build trust in them. If it's not there, I'm going to build that trust by showing them that I'm willing to lay down some of who I am and get at their level and meet them there. Now, what happens when you do that is if you can meet a child at that kind of level, then you pull them up with you. As you show them that you're somebody who, even if they push back on you in a sort of a disrespectful way, you're still going to lead with compassion and love. They're going to go, whoa, this authority thing doesn't let me have what I want, but it sure bends to the need of my heart and hears me and lets me matter. And in the context of that, I'm learning the value of authority and then the value of trust. So that's part of the answer. Secondly, the dynamic of trust is something that actually takes place in a different context than discipline. In the context of, I said, the two big pieces of love and limits. Within the world of limits, trust is there and relevant. But I'm going to build trust in the most powerful way at the level of love. So as I'm teaching that child about love, which we'll talk more about tomorrow, I'm teaching them categories for when you are in a place of need, I'm there for you. When you are broken and fail, I still incline my heart to you. When I make a promise to you, I follow through with it. And in that whole love category of what happens with your need, we'll talk about this tomorrow. I'm teaching them trust at that level. That's ground zero for learning trust. Now, I'm gonna parlay some of that over here when I start dealing with limit setting. And they say, I don't trust you. Well, I've built a lot of trust over here in the love department that I'm going to actually access here when I deal with the limits department. Does that start to address some of those thoughts for you? Good, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Where was I? Bill Clinton? She says, this isn't fair. You get to just make up the rules and we have to follow them. And I wanted to say, yeah, duh. But I thought about finding out that my taxes were going up a good third this year, and I didn't like this, and I hadn't even voted for him. And I stopped and I said, you're right. It really is hard. It's not fair at all. I mean, I do just get to make up rules and then you have to follow them. That happened to me even today. And I want you to know I understand how unfair it feels, and I understand how unfair this feels to you. You still are grounded. So I'm not giving up limits because of love, but I'm bringing love and limits together into a nice little sandwich. All right? In other words, I'm lovingly disappointing. Related to this, no amount of rules alone can change the heart. And this does touch on the issue of trust as well. I mean, ask the Pharisees. And what we're talking about here is heart change. I remember, and I'm going to close with this for our break. I remember one of mine, I was in a conflict with her, and she was a pre-adolescent. And she whirled around at me, and she looked at me, and she said, I hate you. You're the meanest daddy in the whole world. Now, part of me wanted to take her downtown to the Department of Human Services and introduce her to the meanest daddy in the world. This is Roscoe. He actually is the meanest daddy in the world, and you can live with him. But I owned it. I went with her in it. I said, I know I struggle with my anger. We'll talk about this tomorrow, I think. And I imagine I can be pretty mean sometimes. And I imagine sometimes it may even feel like I'm the meanest daddy in the world. And the degree to which that hurts you at times, I hate that I hurt you with my meanness sometimes. I can't let you talk to me like that. If you're angry at me, talk to me about it, but I'm not good with you screaming at me. But I do want you to know that I love you and I care about the ways in which I hurt you. But you're still grounded. Now, she never said it to me ever again. Why? What if I'd said, don't you ever talk to me like that again, young lady? Do you understand? There's probably a good chance she might not have. But where would that stuff have gone? Where would that venom have gone? Our children's hearts, and this relates to submission, it relates to trust, it relates to sin, it relates to anger and the bitterness and the junk we have inside, which you can't just discipline away. Our children's hearts will only change when we welcome them and join that immaturity and brokenness and sinfulness in the context of love and limits. Since this part of our talk has gotten us so much into the issue of the heart, I wanted to include that if you want to help your children grow in their sinfulness, what we do is we bring that sinfulness into a relationship. We say, I've got to set limits on the way you just talk to me, but I also want you to know I totally get how angry you are, and I totally get how resentful you feel, or I totally get how you wanted to call me names. And I'm giving them this love and limits piece, and something about that reaches in and heals their hearts. Again, our goal here is not just obedient little robots. Our goal is how do we help develop character in our children and richness in their hearts. We've looked at the fact that there's room for you to fail, beginning to look at how we teach them about love, making sense of setting limits and helping them make wise choices, and the ability, what it looks like to grow in the ability to heart submit. Let's take a break there. Let's come back in 15 minutes, and we'll finish up and try to do some Q&A. Thank you. or Mike. Oh, there I am. Thanks, dude. Okay, everybody. Let's practice submission. The speaker says, come gather and we will submit. I mean, obviously, there's so many things in this conference that have to do with my parenting book, but I have another story for y'all. Who was here? Last time I was here, I preached on Sunday on the Garden of Eden. Does anybody remember that? Okay, there's a very special story related to that. That's part of a study I've done for like 30 years on the covenant of redemption. I mean, the covenant of grace, as God's story is unfolded throughout all of Scripture, as He's been foretelling Christ all through Scripture. And I've studied it for a very long time, and there was something about my speaking it to y'all, and so many of y'all spoke to me that Sunday and engaged me in really, really, really significant, powerful ways, to where I really felt God tell me on the way home that Sunday night as I flew home. He said, I want you to write this book. And I started it the next day. It's called The One Story. A Psychologist Reaches for the Heart of God. And you guys are in the acknowledgments, because Catalina Foothills Church really helped me pull the trigger to write this book. And I won't get a chance except today or tomorrow to thank you, or those of you live streaming or recording, but I hope that when you get this book, you'll look up your church in the acknowledgments, because y'all gave me that and y'all gave the kingdom that. And that's a great gift. Yes, sir?
Does that mean we all get a free copy?
Absolutely. I'll send a stack to Stone. All Stone has to do is take me to the British Virgin Islands with him, and you'll get a case of books. We'll make this work. I know we will. Have we talked about Stone being in the British Virgin Islands? Can we just do that? I'll let you talk about it then. All right, we've been talking about heart and character, which is a fundamental piece for me as a psychologist. For a psychologist, character doesn't mean he's a man of character or he's a real character. What character means for a psychologist is the collection of abilities that we need to make life work, kind of our software, so to speak. And if you recall, mostly I'm a psychologist to adults. And, they come to see me for various symptoms. And one of the things that I realized after doing therapy for a while is, wow, the reason this person is depressed is because they're missing this or that part of this software. Hey, you know what a great model for parenting would be? To figure out what we need to have in our software to be highly functioning adults and teach kids that, all right? Which is kind of where my parenting model came from. But that's about the heart. A lot of the job of a Christian psychologist is to take the things that God teaches us about us in Scripture and that He teaches us through clinical smarts, and we sort of put hands and feet on that and make sense of how He calls us to live. So what I've been talking to y'all about this evening and tomorrow, I don't know whether you call it psychological or spiritual. I hope you don't know which to call it, because God's truth is God's truth. Let's keep going and look at the rest of the things our kids need, and then do some Q&A. We just talked about submission. The next thing that our kids need is the flip side. Great, it's fun to bend the knee. How do I help my kids learn to be strong, though? This is about having a sense of self. This is about mastery. God calls this steadfastness, perseverance, stewardship. This is about helping your kids develop a chooser and a backbone. We'll talk about this one some tomorrow too. Now, this is complex in a sense because we just talked about how important it is for them to bend the knee and submit, right? But think about it. We're building a software system for life. How are the only compliant, submissive adults doing in life? Right? And again, this is one of the things you see most Christian parenting books focus on. Essentially, number one focus, hang on a second. Number one focus, your children need to respect the authority of the home just as we respect God's authority. And that's kind of it for them, And I think it's legit. I mean, 2 of our 7 abilities have to do with submission. Learning to do what we say and the whole issue of heart submission. That's 28.5% of our parenting. Go us, okay? But there's like 71.5% of parenting that's not just about submission. In other words, I hear God calling us to an array of abilities, not just submitting, not just doing right. Go ask the Pharisees. Just doing right is kind of like kissing your sister. There's not a lot of power in that, all right? Besides, I see a lot of young adults who are raised to just do what they're told, and they're terrified. They now are still living in a one-down child position in the world because they live as a child in a world full of parents. No one ever taught them anything but to do what they're supposed to do. I hear God calling us to so many other things as well, like love and power and submission and forgiveness and steadfastness and all these rich things about being a whole person in His image. All right? So I think if we're talking about equipping our kids for reality in God's universe, then we need to think about some other things as well besides just submitting, and primary among those is developing the ability to be strong and have a sense of self and the ability to handle things. We're building adults in God's image here, okay? We're not kidding around. One of the ways that I say this sometimes is that parenting has 2 goals. I sometimes call them roots and wings. Sometimes I call it protect and prepare. In other words, yeah, we want to give them all those nice little roots and love and connection and belonging. But we also need to give them wings. We also need to get them in a place where they can leave and be strong. I also call it protect and prepare. Now, y'all may have questions later on, like, what do we do about our kids and the stuff in our culture, the things that they see on the news or the things in movies or TV that feel sketchy, or all that time they spend on their phones or electronics. Where do we draw that line? And I'm going to say, I don't know. But I'll tell you this, it's going to be somewhere in a tension between what I call prepare and protect. Protect and prepare. Yeah, I want to protect my children as much as I can from the junk out there in the world. And yet if all I did was protect them, I'm not preparing them to have to engage it and make sense of it without me at some point. So somewhere, okay, I want there to be exposure to some of the things in our culture, but I also want to use that. I'm not going to protect them from all of it. I want to engage that with them and discuss it with them. The first time they're going to engage that junk, I want to be with them, okay? So I'm living in this tension of protect them and also prepare them. Roots and wings. I'm giving them groundedness. I'm giving them strength, okay? This particular topic is on the issue of building that wings, that strong thing. God made us to do this. You see it start with toddlers. What are toddlers' favorite words? No. Mine. One of mine says, me do it myself. Me do it myself. Okay? In other words, all of a sudden, they start to have like a little sense of self. My 2-year-old grandson, his mother said by age of 2, he ought to have a 100-word vocabulary. And I said, well, can 68 of them be no? I think we're good, Now, when they start this kind of push back, this isn't their willful little sin nature happening, okay? Though that's part of the story, of course. It's also the beginning of a me, the beginning of developing a sense of self and a sense of strength. And though we just talked about, setting limits and disappointing them, we actually want this. It's the foundation of being a whole adult one day, okay? So we're going to limit them a minute ago, and we're going to empower them at the same time. Again, like rubbing your head and patting your stomach. So let's look at this power thing a little bit. There's 2 different parts of it in my view. I call them identity and strength. Identity is sort of sense of self, personhood, knowing who I am. And again, this isn't self-centeredness. When I talk about a sense of self, I'm not talking about self-centeredness. They don't need our help developing that. This is about having a sense of me. This is about not needing to walk around asking, what's everybody else doing? You know, I want to be like everybody else. What are they doing, all right? This is knowing who they are and what they value. Biblically speaking, this is stewardship. This is what am I going to do with the me that God has given me? This is when, when Joshua leads the people in the promised land and he says, choose ye this day whom ye will serve. In other words, reach inside and kind of go, who am I and what I value and what do I want and who am I going to serve? And Joshua says, it's for me and my house, we'll serve Yahweh. But I need to decide. You got to have a ye. That's what we're talking about here is developing that chooser, okay? I was talking to a mother a few years back and she had this son who was about 8 years old and he had run into a little problem in school. And she told me that she decided to ask him how he wanted to handle the problem at school. And he told her. And he handled it. And I was just really struck by that. It's like this opportunity at 8 years old for his mother to go, how would you like to handle it? And he actually had to think about it, and by golly, it worked, That's identity happening right there, boys and girls. Now, if she doesn't want her own personal Kim Jong-un on her hands, she's also got to teach him that what she wants matters too, okay? This isn't like, tell us who you are, Johnny, and you can run the world. It's tell us who you are, Johnny, so you can function in the world, all right? So what we do is we look for opportunities where it's safe and there's room and permission for them to ask kind of, who am I? They don't get to decide whether they do their homework, but they could have a snack first and do their homework later. You get to pick. Or you could do music or baseball. You get to pick. Or, I've laid out 2 outfits. You pick. By the way, that's kind of a throwaway. I just stuck that in this conference once. I picked out 2 outfits. You get to pick. And this woman came up to me a couple of conferences ago, and she said, that just struck me. No one ever asked me that. No one ever let me choose. I went, wow, that was kind of a throwaway. That was her takeaway. Or we ask questions sometimes. We give them opportunities to choose. We ask questions. What do you think about that? How do you feel about that? You seem really excited about that. I love being a mirror too. Kids go, look what I drew. Instead of going, man, that's wonderful. I want to be more of a mirror and say, wow, I bet you're really proud about that. You worked really hard about that. You really engaged that, didn't you? That was tough, and you did it See, I'm telling them information about them, not me. Oh, I'm so proud of you. It's not about me. It's about them, okay? I'm teaching them identity there, okay? All right, number 2, we don't just build identity, we're also going to build strength. Your kids will help you know when you need to do this. We're going to talk about this one a lot tomorrow because it's one of the most powerful ways that we teach love to school-age kids is by helping them learn to be powerful, okay? So I'm going to be a little skimmy on this because we'll hit it harder tomorrow. But there will come a time in your relationship with your kids, in your life with them, in which they will be coming to you with problems that you'll find difficult to fix. Problems like some kids being mean to them at school, or they get afraid of the weather. I'm afraid a tornado's going to hit the house. Or I'm afraid of you dying. Or I'm afraid I won't be able to go to sleep. I love that one. And no matter how much reassurance you give them, it doesn't seem to work. Have you noticed that phenomenon with your kids? Well, the reason that you'll find these problems difficult to solve with more reassurance and love and roots is because you can't solve them with more reassurance and love and roots. You have to fix them with wings, with strength. In other words, when you experience, we'll say more about this tomorrow, but when you experience that realistic helplessness, that no matter what you do, they're still concerned, that's the time to start de-parenting. Remember we said the 3 stages of parenting are attending, parenting, and de-parenting? When you start running into those situations where your kids keep going, but I'm afraid of so-and-so, and nothing you do to reassure them helps, that's one of your little tells that it's time to start pushing wings and pushing de-parenting. In other words, to say things more like this: I know you're scared, but you know what else I also know? I also know that you can do this. We can do this. I'm going to help you. We're going to do this together. Here, I'll show you. In other words, sometimes kids need us to really see and value and understand. You know the whole concept of being understood. Don't you want to be understood? Sometimes kids need us to understand their vulnerabilities and their fears and their needs. That's sweet, right? But it's the same way a lot of kids need us to understand and show them and teach them something they don't know yet, that they're strong. A lot of kids don't know that they're strong, and we're going to teach them. You'll find these kids will come up with these problems. I'm scared of this. I'm scared of that. And when you can't reassure them, that's your sign to say, you know what? I know you can do this. I know something about you you don't know yet. I'm bored. Well, I am sure that you can come up with something to do to entertain yourself. To hear the double message: A, I'm getting myself off the hook. B, I'm teaching them you got to be strong enough to do this. They don't get picked for backyard soccer. I want to be kind, love and limits. Love is going to say, oh, baby, that's the worst. Yuck. I love you. That's tough. Now, get back out there and get in that game. I know you can do it. One of the things that we'll say tomorrow is another one of my favorite secrets of the universe, but it is this: that children get their view of themselves and of their world from the eyes of their parents. And I want them looking in my eyes and seeing that I think they're strong. I think you can handle it. I have a lot of confidence in you. I want them looking in my eyes, and what they see reflected back in that mirror is, wow, you think I can do it? And they say, I'm scared, I can't go to sleep. And I want to say, I know that it's scary. Hear the love part? I care about that. That is scary. But you know what else I know? You can figure it out and you can do it. And I'll be praying for you, and I'll check on you. And tomorrow we'll have a big party celebrating that you went to sleep. I'll bring the champagne. Anyway, this is about empowerment, which, pardon the psychobabble term, but is as important as teaching love, okay? I was talking to a mom not long ago, and she's just super connected and bonded with her little 3-year-old, and they're just all cuddles and togetherness, and he's just so cute. And they're all sweet, but that's all that they do. And he doesn't sleep through the night, and he crawls in bed with her in the middle of the night, and he's got a ton of anxiety, and apparently so does she. So part of our job is not just building that love thing, but also building this independence thing. Now, this is a great place for dads, because just sort of dynamically in the terms of the universe, dads have this real role of building strength and building power, and I really want to support you in that. Dads, you know, you hear a lot of dads who have a child who has anxiety, and this dad's like, oh, come on, man up. Don't be such a scaredy cat. And I'm like, dude, let me get this straight. You're teaching him to be more powerful by shaming him. Like, I'm sorry, my head's screwed on backwards, but not that backwards, all right? Dads, we can be power brokers. You get a dad who says to a child who has fears, tell you what, it is scary. I get scared sometimes. You don't think I get scared, like, you know, flying all the way across the country and speaking to a bunch of people in Arizona? They're scary. No, but seriously, like that, sure, that's scary. But let me show you how to handle it. We'll do it together. You get a dad who says, yeah, I get scared. You get scared. We get scared. Now let's learn how to handle it together. That kid's unstoppable. Dads, you're power brokers in that sense. And this whole issue of helping kids learn to be powerful and strong, you get a lot of equity, a lot of mojo in that department, okay? So identity and power, they are as important as submission and connection, okay? Now, blind spots. Remember blind spots? I said blind spots were going to be important to us, and one of the reasons we need a big grid is because all our kids are different. Some places you need to push more, with some kids, more emphasis on this or that with some children than others. Regarding strength, some of y'all are sitting out here during this particular part of the presentation going, thanks, Doc, but no thanks. Our child has no need for us to empower him anymore. He already is Kim Jong-un. Thank you very much, you know. I was working the parents of this teenage daughter years back. When I worked with teenagers, when I for my 30th anniversary of my practice, I thought, what do you want, John? What do you want, like, to celebrate 30 years of being in practice? You want a Ferrari? You want to buy an island? I said, no, I want to stop seeing teenagers. That's like my dream. Anyway, it's been the best thing. Anyway, but back when I used to see teenagers, anyway, I was talking to these parents. I do a ton of parent consultation, as I told you. I never work with a teenager without working with the parents. If you have a teenager who's in therapy, make the therapist teach you what they are learning. Don't let them say, well, yeah, we're having some really neat sessions. I want details, and I want what my role is going to be in this. You're part of it. Otherwise, this is a little off topic, but otherwise it's like you bring your sick little fish to the fish doctor, and they clean all the algae off the fish, and then what happens? They go home and throw them in the same aquarium, all right? You're the aquarium. Okay, so I want you growing in there too. So anyway, I'm working with these parents. This is a super obnoxious teenage daughter who is running their house. And I was teaching them to set limits on her, like to dethrone her to some degree. And they're saying things like, oh, we could never say that to her. She would never speak to us again. And I'm like, and that's a bad thing? Mom's like, I just want her to know how loved she is. I'm like, I want her to know where juvie is, but that's a different... Anyway, bottom line, this girl does not need more empowerment, all right? Somebody needs to take away her glittery pink cell phone until she stops going, oh my gosh, you guys are so retarded, okay? And then, that's what we need to do. So see how this can be a grid for your decision making? All right, how do I help my kids deal with pain? God is big on this one. He talks about making sense of mourning, humility, getting the log out of your eye, forgiveness. Think how much this is a theme he calls us to. Part of parenting is sanctification. Part of parenting is helping our kids develop the qualities God calls us to. So this one's about how do you help your kids not be a perfectionist? How do you help them deal with disappointment and failure? Not get what they want. Or even real pain. I've got a client right now who's divorced and has children, and basically her ex, he doesn't want time with the kids. He just wants to have time with the kids so he can be hurtful and unkind to the kids, so it'll hurt her. And, of course, the legal system supports this wholeheartedly. How do I help her with her children to deal with real pain? They have a cruel father. He's a man-child. We're going to talk more about this one tomorrow too. But how do we help our kids deal with the fact that the world is so fallen and broken? Usually what we humans do, we weren't designed for this one, by the way. I mean, since we were designed to live in a garden that was perfect, it's really not part of our software system to be able to make sense of pain. We're fish out of water on that one. So we all do kooky things when we encounter pain, usually some sort of protest, like we blame other people like we do in our marriages. Remember blame marriage that we talked about last year? We look at our spouse and go, this is ridiculous, okay? Or when your child is having a tantrum, they're living in a position of protest. I want an Oompa Loompa now. They're basically saying, I want what I want. When I want it, they're protesting. Another thing we can do when we're encountering pain is we can attack ourselves. Like those kids who are like, I'm just stupid. Or if I was cuter, I would, whatever. We can go to escapes. You know, one of the reasons that teens go to sex, drugs, and rock and roll is to get away from pain, right? So as we're trying to help them with this acting out behavior, we've got to address what the pain is underneath. Sometimes we can just shut down the whole dynamic of depression, which we can talk about if you want. But how do we help our kids with that? Some thoughts. Number one, be very careful about rescuing your kids from the manageable pains in life. We are going to talk about this a lot tomorrow. I know I keep saying that, but it's true. We don't want our children to hurt or to struggle, but they will. But the good news is this. Your children are going to encounter pain. But one of the secrets of the universe is something I discovered somewhere along my practice, and that is that pain itself doesn't harm children. Unresolved pain is what harms children. Okay, so as we're looking at our children as they begin approaching things in their lives that hurt, and there's nothing worse than seeing our children hurt, and we see our children engaging pain, and we don't want that, and we do anything in the world to not have them engage that pain, I want you to begin by remembering this. Your children experiencing pain in itself will not harm them. Unresolved pain will harm them. Pain that's brought into relationship actually makes us stronger. Go read Romans 5. Pain produces perseverance, and perseverance proven character, and proven character hope, and hope does not disappoint. You know the verse. In other words, what I hear in the office is not, I have all this pain because Dad was an alcoholic. What I hear in the office is, I have all this pain because Dad was an alcoholic, and what? And no one ever talked about it. There's the hook. There's the toxin. Unresolved pain is what hurts us, okay? So the good news is, if our kids engage pain, and we are there in a present way to help them resolve it, it actually makes it better, okay? So avoid being rescue rangers there, and instead learn what it means to come alongside of our kids. In other words, what is resolved pain? Pain that somebody joins me with. Pain that somebody comes alongside of me with. In other words, another word we're going to talk about tomorrow, because I just talk about this word every chance I get, is the word with. For some reason I don't understand, y'all, and it's my job. If you are with somebody in the midst of their pain, if you care, if you connect, if they have your eyes, if they have your presence, somehow the pain metabolizes, it gets better. And that's one of the reasons that therapy works, but it's one of the ways that we handle things with our children too. If I can sit in my child's pain and go, baby, oh my gosh, nothing hurts like that. I remember hurting like that. We love you and we are with you. Notice I'm not fixing it. Notice I'm not diminishing it. I'm being with them. Something about that heals it. I don't even understand why. But with is God's favorite preposition. We did talk about this at the marriage conference. Go look it up. He loves it. Walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you will make it all better. No, you'll be with me. Emmanuel, God with us. Lo, I'll be with you always until the end of the age. He loves with. So those of you with attenders, just putting words on their little feelings. You know, you've gotten that point where they should have had a nap like an hour ago and they're fragmenting, you know. You can just see the shards exploding from them. We manage that frustration and that anger and that comes over when we say, I know you're so tired. And we're going to get you home and we're going to get you some juice and we're going to have some cuddles. And you don't know it, but when you're saying that, you're doing something beautifully psychologically sophisticated. You're actually help metabolizing their pain. Go you. You're teaching them that love and suffering can go together. That in the midst of suffering, love, even some of the best love, can be present. Can you believe that? You have a school-age kid and you're like, oh man, every kid got a hit but you? Dude, I've so been there. Or your best friend has a new best friend and now they're being mean to you. Baby, we love you. We're with you. And when we do that, we're teaching them that what's bad and what's hurtful and what's painful can be okay. That if pain is loved, if pain is with, that somehow it heals. And then you'll start to see them get to have that inside. I used to love watching our girls as they got older play with their doll babies. And you'd see them hold the doll baby and they go, it's all right. It's okay. And I would just die inside because where did they learn that? Where did they get that? Now it's inside of them. So remember what I was saying about Callie saying you're the meanest day in the world and how we heal sin. We heal meanness inside of us in the context of empathy, connection, limit setting, but by being connected with it. Well, guess what? The only way to heal pain is the same thing. It's for it to be understood and for it to be connected in relationship. It's magic. It's why therapy works. I don't get it. So, it's also one of the reasons the body of Christ works and heals us, because what God calls us to in the New Testament is all those each others, okay? Now, third way we help our kids deal with pain. And this one is huge, and it's the good news, and it's the bad news, all right? Unfortunately, the most powerful way that we teach kids how to metabolize and make sense of and deal with how yucky things in life are is by letting them see and experience us dealing with our own disappointments and theirs. I told you it was bad news, okay? In other words, can we face disappointment, loss, pain, our children's failures, and stay grounded and stay cool? Can you stay cool? Like two little Fonzies. What's Fonzie like? He's cool, right? Correctamundo. In other words, how we act in the face of disappointment, our own and our children's, it gives our kids kind of a vibe. They're kind of going, give me a vibe for how big a deal it is for me to screw up. Well, they're watching how we act, all right? So what do they see? Everybody, let's cringe together right now. You want to? I mean, this makes me depressed. What my kids are going to see in terms of how I deal with disappointment is going to color how big a deal they see disappointment as being and loss. I'll get to that in a second, but here's a little rule of thumb I like in regard to this. Rule of thumb. When it comes to your children's disappointments and losses, you can't be any more than X minus 1 as upset about their disappointment as they are. X being the integer that defines how upset they are. Okay? In other words, your daughter doesn't get cheerleader. She's going to cry on her bed all afternoon. It's the moms who are blowing up. They're like exploding social media and they're going to change this policy, you know. And now this child has not one problem, they have two. They didn't make cheerleader and their mom's a wacko, okay? Which is one of the reasons that teenagers often won't tell their parents about significant stuff that happens in their life because they don't want to see you go off the rails, all right? So you got to stay X minus 1, how upset they are. All right. So how do they see us react? Now, as I said, this whole notion makes me depressed because I was a reactive maniac sometime, because I'm not anymore. I mean, I'm way past that. Anyway, what are we going to do? Let's remember our principle. Remember, this is not a Be a Better Parent conference. What do? The only thing better than a perfect parent is a humble parent. So yeah, show them our poise or show them our humility. So when you mess up, when you screw up, when you overreact, when you act like a complete ditz, swing back in. Man, I was mean to you. I way overreacted. I even shamed you. Like, that's just ridiculous. Not okay. In other words, this is one of my favorite secrets of the universe. We're talking a lot about showing our kids grace here in this category. That's what this category is about, right? Grace. Well, according to the grace effect, God's principle of how he made this world redeemable, we can teach grace by needing grace. In other words, you can show your kids poise and grace if you handle your disappointments and theirs well. Good for you. 10 points for Gryffindor. But if you're like me and you screw that up, you get to also show them grace by showing them how much you need grace. By showing them your humility when you mess it up. In other words, I'm not telling you that you have to handle all these things with grace and poise. I'm announcing that you can. And in doing that, we're actually teaching them about how to make sense of messed up life because we're teaching them about how to make sense of messed up us. Do you see how this is just a beautiful gift God gave us? That somehow this isn't just about parenting well. The reason I call the book Setting Parents Free is because when I started learning this, I got set free. Like, you mean I don't have to be afraid all the time? Maybe even my screw-ups can help my kids be better people? Are you kidding me? Jesus made that up. Do you see how this would also help them with the whole other side of badness, and that is shame? You know, what I do with how bad I am? Well, here you've got a kid coming who has a parent who's not afraid to admit that they're bad. We're all born shamed. It's part of being born under the law. And we actually need to kind of unshame children. Well, a huge way that we do that is by our children seeing that I'm not afraid to tell you my fallenness. I'm not afraid to be bad. I'm not afraid to screw up. I'm not afraid for you to see that. I'm thumbing my nose at shame when I say that. I love that passage in Hebrews where it says Jesus, who, despising the shame, went to the cross. I need that. I need a Savior who says, you know what, shame? I despise you. I need that Savior. And that's the kind of parent I want you to be. Despising the shame. Where you say, you know what? I totally messed that up. I need your grace. We all do. That's what our family's about. Which leads us to, how do we teach them about God? Ultimately, we were created for a relationship with Him, right? And all the stuff about development and character, that didn't have much ultimate meaning outside of a relationship with Him. So how do we teach them about God? Well, firstly, we've already been talking about that. Speaking of shame, my cord is caught on my stool. And so, there. Okay. Teach them about God. Firstly, we've already been talking about that. Okay? I want you to get that. In other words, it's not like we've come to the religious segment of our program, okay? In other words, what have we been doing for the last hour and a half? Is that all it's been? 2 hours. What's it been? 2 hours and a half. We've been talking about love and limits and submission and forgiveness and strength and humility. Okay? In other words, we've been talking about parenting and what makes healthy kids, but in the background, we've been building the software of what a human being needs to relate to God. Okay? Then when they learn content about God later on, they already got a software system to plug it into. Okay? So we're ahead of the game. A huge reason that people have problems in their spiritual life is not because they're bad people or they like sinning or something. It's because they have character blind spots in these very capabilities that we're talking about, okay? In other words, we're building an operating system here. So think about it. How is your obedience going to go if no one ever taught you the capacity to submit? Get it? Okay? How is your understanding of grace going to go if no one ever taught you that whole notion of making sense of pain and badness and humility that we just talked about? Okay? In other words, our character is the tool with which we relate to everyone, including God. That's why I am a Christian psychologist. Because if you grow in your character, you grow in your relationship with God. There may be nothing more important that I could tell you. But point being, it's not like there's religious aspects of life and psychological aspects of life. But how do we show them God specifically? Okay, we've been doing it in a general sense. What do we do specifically? I think about two different categories, content and experience. Content. Of course, overt teaching is legit. Devotion times with your kids. Christian schools are great. Taking them to Sunday school, giving them the teaching thing in your family. Though in our family devotion's always degenerated into you will sit down and you will worship as you are told. Do you understand? You know, this real sweet time with the Lord, y'all. It was... Put that, you know, really showed him his heart. It was neat. Yeah. Anyway, so great. Teach them content if you can pull it off better than I did. But what I want you to get regarding content is when God was asked this question, how do we teach content to our kids about you? He didn't say go do family devotions. He said teach them as you walk along the way, as you rise up, as you sit down. In other words, make life a family devotion. In other words, if you really want to teach your kids about God, bring him up all the time. He's there all the time. I loved this part of parenting. And if you have fun with God and you have fun being creative and playful, this is candy land. You're going to have a great time with this. And you can just do it any time. Your kids go, oh, look, Daddy, look at that rainbow. I would just say, you know, isn't that crazy? I mean, you guys color on paper and coloring books. God colors using light and water vapor. And he paints that. He's a crazy artist. I knew I was getting somewhere when one of mine said, it was during the fall, and she said, look, Daddy, God painted that tree red. I'm like, he sure did, didn't he? Look for those chances. I used to... I love to cook, and I would always cook with the girls when I could. And, you know, cracking the eggs in the batter was always a prized opportunity, you know. And so one time I remember I'd learned this and tested it, actually, before I did it. But I told them, I said, if you squeeze an egg with just your fingers, not your thumb, just your fingers, and this is true right now, if you squeeze an egg, you can't break it. Go home and try it. Over the sink, just in case I'm wrong, okay? Anyway, they're like, you know, like this. And I get to say, you know, that's because God wants to protect little chickens from goobers like y'all, you know? It's everywhere. We used to play a game where we would taste the food before we said the blessing. That way you'd know exactly, you know, how thankful to be, you know, because otherwise, you have to thank you, Lord, for this food. It might stink. I don't know if it's worth thanking for. It's you know. Anyway, your kids get that, and they get, whoa, this is real, and this is a real person, and we're really having a conversation with him. And this is broccoli. I'm not as thankful as I was about Domino's last night, you know. And this one happened with my oldest grandson last year when he was 3, and I'll probably start crying again, so pardon me. He and I were sitting in the back of a boat as somebody was tooling around, and he looks up at me and he said, Papa, who made me up? And I said, God did. He thought, I want to make up the coolest kid in the world, so I'm going to make up Whit Deemer. He said, are you God? And I said, no. But when God looks at you, his face looks a lot like mine does when I look at you. You'll get chances like that. They're lying around on the ground like rocks. So basic principle. Everything is the way it is because God made it that way. Just show that to your children. That's the best content there is. Okay? Now, experience. Unfortunately, again, one of the most powerful ways that our kids learn about their gut sense of what God is like is through what they experience. Notice that's been a theme for us. Kids are concrete, and so they learn the deepest things in concrete experience. Do you ever wonder why you can know something about God, but you don't feel different in your heart? I call that the head-heart gap, and it's actually what got me into psychology. How come I can know I'm forgiven, but I still feel guilty? How come I can know God's in control, but I feel anxious, like he's asleep at the switch? How do you make sense of that? That question sent me to grad school. Well, I'm going to tell you the answer right now. Took me 10 years to figure it out, and you guys just show up on a Friday night. I'm going to give it to you for free. Crying out loud. Anyway, we learn things in our head through what we study, what we read, coming to a conference, listen to a podcast, read a book, whatever like that. But we get that gut sense of what God is like through how we are treated in relationships. One of the reasons there's so many each others in the New Testament is not because Paul is trying to tell us we ought to be nice to each other. It's because the way in which we relate to one another creates a relational experience that will change us for better or for worse. And the way in which we are treated and the way in which we treat our kids gives them that gut template for what God is like. So you're cuddling that little one before bedtime and holding them and singing to them. And you may not realize it, but one of the things you're teaching them is a core template for how God holds us, even in the littlest places. He even uses that reference point in Isaiah. A mother may forget her nursing child, but I will not forget you. Or that little 8-year-old runs up to you when you get home from work and wants to jump up in your lap and tell you about his day, and you muss his hair up, and he sees the delight in your eyes when you see him. You don't realize that you're building a gut core emotional experiential sense that God welcomes us when we run to him. You're doing that. How we treat our kids helps create that template. Now, you know where I'm going next. I hope you know by now. Doesn't that make you depressed too? You mean kids are going to get their sense of what God is like from how they relate to me? Check, please. This is not what I want to hear, okay? But don't let it bum you out. Remember where we're going here. Number one, let your walk match your talk. Grow some. Have people hold you accountable to be a better parent, somebody who better reflects God's character in his heart. I mean, you're coming to a parenting conference on Friday night, crying out loud. But we're all going to fail at that. So, blessedly, let's go back to our principle. Let's go back to our freedom. The only thing better than a perfect parent is a humble parent. You know what else you can do? You can let your talk match your walk. In other words, quit talking like you got it together since you don't. In other words, kid, I need grace as much as you. I ought to go to timeout. So this is our background all along. I used to struggle with my temper and scream and yell at my kids and all that. I'll tell you more about that tomorrow. But I decided to talk to them about it. And I said, guys, you know what? I can remember Callie, and this was years later that Callie's told me I was the meanest daddy in the world, but she would have been right then too. But I said, my anger is a problem, and it comes out at y'all. And if you guys do knuckleheaded stuff and need discipline, that's one thing, and I'm going to put you in timeout or whatever. But if I scream and yell and get angry, that's on me. That's my immaturity. That is my problem, and I want you to call me out on it. And I kind of gave them a stun gun to use on me about it. And it wasn't too long afterwards that Callie, the oldest, who's now a therapist, she came in my room crying and going, Daddy, I know we were bad, but now you're just being mean. You want instant anger management therapy? Again, as we are fellow sinners with them, fellow screw-ups with them, we show them what a relationship with God looks like. The only thing better than a perfect parent is a humble parent. And we show them God in two ways. We show them God by reflecting him sometimes. Look at me and you can see a fragment of what he's like. But we also show them God by showing them what it looks like to really need God. If you're somebody who really needs God, they look a lot like this. And if you want to be somebody who really needs God, then it will look like this. Can you do that? I know you can. I know you can't stop. Because you try to stop and be better, but you're not any more than I was. So, that's our Magnificent Seven, guys. You did it. Congratulations. We've been teaching our kids about love and about choices and about wisdom and about strength and gravity and submission and humility and loving God. And mostly we've been teaching them how to be a fallen, screwed up, broken human like their parents. That's Christian parenting. Say hallelujah. Now, don't feel like you got to get all these now. I wanted you to have the overview. Listen to the recording. We'll go into more detail tomorrow. Read the book. My podcast has a bunch of other stuff on it too. But I want you to have this. I may be rounding up a little here, but as far as I'm aware, you're not going to get this anywhere else. We've just built a whole model, a comprehensive model for your parenting and integrated that into their relationship with God. I want you to have this, even though I've worked you hard tonight, okay? But whatever you do in all of this, don't use any of this to put more pressure on yourself. I think I've made my point with that tonight, okay? Great, it was an awesome conference. He showed us 7 ways we were screwing up our kids, Don't live that way. Remember, parenting is primarily a relationship, not a task. I tell parents sometimes that parenting is kind of like being in a rowboat that has 5 holes in the bottom. I've got 2 hands and 2 knees, and there's always kind of one hole that's missing. I was being repentant to my children one day. I'll close with this and we can do some questions. I had screwed up and I was doing what I was saying. I was saying, man, I really kind of messed that up. I didn't handle that well at all. And I shouldn't have treated y'all like that. And then foolishly I continued. And I said, you got to forgive me because this is the first time I've ever been a dad. I'm kind of making it up as I go. And this little voice from the back seat goes, well, is there like a book you can read or a class you can take? Anyway, all right, let's do some questions. You want to grab us a roving mic?
Can you elaborate on the if-then statements for experience?
Yes.
For example, in the situation of kids acting up, so my if-then will be, if you keep doing this, you're going to get spanking, which is my expectation is it's not that sort of if-then that you're looking for. So how does a parent deal with that situation? And are you expecting us to go to that situation with a prepared list of if-thens or consequences? Or
Yeah, we're going to talk for a whole talk about this tomorrow. But let me try to answer your question in a sense. I will be wanting you to get this mentality. In other words, what we'll talk about tomorrow is what I call a power struggle, and that is the if-then thing doesn't happen all the time. It's not like, would you pass the salt, and if you don't, you're going to time out. It's like you only need it when there's a conflict. But I want you to start developing sort of the model of once I feel that resistance, and you can feel it like a disturbance in the force, you know that there's going to be some pushback. What our natural inclination is to engage in a power struggle. And a power struggle, we will say tomorrow, is defined by 2 elements. A child questions your authority. That's not enough. The second part has to be there too, and you attempt to prove it. Okay, so they go, I'm not going to go take the garbage out. And you go, oh, yes, you are. All right, now you are in a power struggle at that point, and they will win because they're better at being immature than you are. Okay? Now, the moment you feel that power struggle, that's going to be a place where we create if-then, because our goal is going to be changing the conflict from which one of us is going to win to you get to the basic principle that's going to apply for the rest of their lives, that you can have anything you want in life. You just have to pay for it. Okay? That's the Bible in a nutshell, okay? In other words, I'm not going to make you, but I'm going to begin formulating for you, something we'll say tomorrow that one of the things I call discipline is safe suffering. I'm going to create a small miniature version of the consequences that reality creates. Now, if you're an adult and you never take out the garbage, one of the consequences is that your wife is going to be mad at you all the time. All right, instead of waiting until then for you to learn, or until your whole backyard fills up with garbage, or until you don't learn about going to work, if I just don't feel like going to work, I'm not going to go. I can wait and let that happen, but good parenting is going to try to rush that up to the moment and say, okay, well, I'm not going to fight you about the garbage, but here's kind of what I'm going to create. You don't have to take out the garbage. I was wrong. Electronics aren't coming on in the house until you take out the garbage, but you can read the classics, in the garbage-filled house, okay? In other words, it does take a little bit of practice and creativity to learn what the choices are. Like my 4-year-old grandson loves Spider-Man and his Spider-Man suit. I mean, he's like, has the fingers down and everything. And it's like, I was over at their house the other day, and my daughter says, if you keep doing that, I'm taking the Spider-Man outfit. And it was like, it was like, I'm going to pull out a red-hot bicycle chain and hit you with it. It's like, he was like, yes, ma'am. He wants that Spider-Man outfit. She's learned that, okay? So we will find lots of them. You use spanking. I'm often asked that. I don't have a problem with spanking per se. I think both extremes of spanking are less than ideal. There's that whole notion of somebody who misunderstands the biblical imagery of the rod, which is a metaphor from the Old Testament throughout to Revelation of a symbol of authority, and interpret that as meaning we should only spank our children with a rod. Like, really? Does that mean that God only owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, not the 1,001th hill? I mean, we got a metaphor going here, dude. Think with your right brain. Some people are like spanking and only spanking. The other extreme is never spank. That's corporal punishment. I don't have a problem with spanking in itself any more than I have a problem with a Coleman camping stove. In other words, I don't ordinarily cook with a Coleman stove. But if I'm out in the world and I have no other options and I need to cook something out in the wild, I don't have no problem with a Coleman stove. And if you won't get in your car seat right now and there's a storm coming and we have to get home and I need to pop your leg as a consequence, I'm fine with spanking. But I don't want to use it as my go-to. Now, another reason I don't want to use it as my go-to is because, as we'll say tomorrow, the goal of discipline is to teach an understanding of cause-effect choices in the world. In other words, nobody's going to walk around as an adult and say to me, John, I know you're tired, but you need to look over your talk before tonight. And I'm going to go, no, I don't want to. Well, there's nobody who's going to say, well, if you don't, so I have to have that inside of me. Inside of me, there's something that says, there are dear people who I want to be with, and I want to refresh my memory on this. That's an if-then. No spankings, just that. Now, somehow I need to have that internalized inside of me. The goal of discipline is to help kids internalize that kind of thing. Now, sky's the limit in terms of what the if-thens are. Yes? Check.
I have a question about how it gets complicated with siblings.
Yeah.
And when you have siblings with different, like one is needing you to be empowering and one is needing you to help them bend the knee.
Uh-huh.
And it gets to the point where the dovetailing between the two of them, right? And how they negotiate between the two of them, one of them will assert, like the older one will assert like, and like make the younger one do whatever he wants, right? And so then like, or if they're negotiating, like he just always gets his way and she will do anything for him. And so like, and it plays right into their blind spots. And so sometimes I feel like I enter into it and it becomes so artificial because I'm like, no, you can't just give him what he wants and so I have to like build up these if-thens that are so different that they're
Right.
both going, why is that rule not applying to me? And it just gets really
Right.
complicated
Yes.
because of because I know they're so different and I'm seeing them play it out and I feel like I don't always enter in. Sometimes I just let it go and that's if it's not like harming anyone. But then sometimes you want to be like, okay, you can't just like be the little mini king over there and does anything for you. It happens a lot when like she wants to play with him and he'll be like, well, okay, but you have to serve my every need, you know. And she'll be like, great.
How
And
old are they?
10 and 8.
That's such a good question. That's a very challenging question. Let me throw out some principles for us to think about regarding it, because I think it's too complicated for me to fix it right now. But certainly it can be something we can reflect on. Number one, you're already on track with recognizing the potential hazards of getting too involved in a sibling dispute, okay? In other words, siblings love triangulating a parent, okay? And actually being required to work things out as siblings is a helpful dynamic in a family. I joke with people that having a sibling is the best training you can ever get for being married. In other words, here's this person and you love them, but you could strangle them in the middle of the night every now and then, but you got to make it work. And, it's like being married. So, a lot of times, all things being equal, they're like, he won't let me play with the ball, but he had it first. And I want to say, yeah, right. Well, what's going to happen is both of you are going to lose the ball until you work that out. And sort of an all things being equal scenario, you would want them to, in essence, say, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, so we better work this out. All right. But you're talking about a very interesting and difficult little dynamic in that their little blind spots are perfectly oriented toward making them more susceptible to this little dance. All right, so let me ask you a couple of questions. Outside of the context of his relationship with his sister, what sort of consequences befall the young dictator?
I mean, if he doesn't do chores, then he loses privileges like video games or, mostly video games.
All right, do you see these kind of consequences having any impact on him? Do you live in any sort of power struggle with him? In other words, let me tell you my question behind my question. He is enjoying his power over her in an unrepentant manner. So I'm wondering, what does he do when he gets alphaed?
Yeah, there is some for sure. He's because he's like started puberty early and like so he's definitely got these like angst moments and
These what?
these like angsty moments where there's a lot of attitude and so this is like new in life, like we're trying to figure out. But I feel like I see both power struggle, but also it's not the worst I could imagine. Like with him, like he in really good ways. I think when he is really upset, I can go to him in like the good ways that I've heard you give this talk before, so I feel like I've tried things before. And so I don't feel like it's the worst. Like I feel like it's at work, the power struggle in a good way where we have set up expectations and he generally will be like, okay, I know I have to do that before I can get what I want.
Okay, good.
So it's like, I think it's good for the most part.
Okay, good. And what kind of conversation do you have with him about his dance, his dynamic, his taking advantage of his sister? Is there a conversation there?
Maybe I haven't talked about that with him alone specifically much because he's so he's just, I can take it or leave it. Like, I don't care about playing with her. So, like, that's why it's hard to make it be like, okay, if you squabble, he's like, great. Then I get to go to read in my room. Like,
How much does he want from y'all? Take me to the birthday party, buy me this video game.
he's really independent, like, and he really likes alone time. So, I mean, he'd be happy to read by himself.
Okay, so
much.
he doesn't want a lot from anyone, but he takes from his sister.
Yes.
Where I was going to go with that, which if you give me a different answer, I would have impressed you with it, was I'll make a variation on it. This remotely impressive, but not as much as it would have been. I want to have a conversation with him that says, you know, I mean, I'm not saying this to him. This is between me and y'all. What is the role of the law, the civil authority, police? What is the role of civil authority, scripturally speaking, if you read like Romans? The role of the law, the role of authority is to protect the weak against the strong. In other words, we have cops because big, scary, strong people can come and try to hurt us, and the cops protect us. And I want y'all to have that kind of role with him, and maybe power broker dad go, dude, here's kind of the deal. You got a lot of power, and to coin a phrase, with great power comes great responsibility, all right? And so I kind of got my eye on you, and I don't know how much you're going to be wanting from me, but I'm going to be taking as many clues as I can from you about how generous you want me to be with you by how generous you are with your sister. And I'm not going to get in the middle of this and play referee and defend her, because we're going to have conversations with her as well. But my conversation with you is just be aware, if I see you using your power over her to take advantage of her, that you and I will have dealings. And that might mean that we take away that book that you're enjoying reading for tonight. And I want you to be a little bit more of an advocate for her. Now, the obvious danger of that is you're now enabling her to be a little victim.
Which, that's what I was even going to say. I've said he's like the little king, but she also plays her part fully.
I know. So this answer isn't over yet. Okay, so where else in her life does she show a lack of power besides her relationship with her brother? Notice I'm answering this question by talking about these children's hearts and their general themes. You can't answer a specific question. A bad psychologist goes, what is this person doing right now? A good psychologist goes, who is this person that we're talking about? So I'm wanting to broaden it a little bit to help us answer it. Go ahead.
Right, so with her, I do a lot of times have to talk her, like I'm with you right now because I know you're really sad that brother doesn't want to play with you. Because she is always wanting to be with all the time and has a really hard time being alone and playing on her own, or like going to bed at night. Being left in the bed is hard for her.
Right.
So all those themes show up. So I know that I'm supposed to be leaning on, like, I know you can do this. I know you can have a good time by yourself for a little while. Like, so I guess it's just, my question is, how much stewardship does it take? Because sometimes I'm like, do I enter in, or
Sometimes you're like, what?
like with the squabbling when I'm watching it happen, I just don't ever know.
I'm in favor of y'all getting involved with this. I'm in favor of some accountability for the boy. I'm in favor of more empowering of your daughter.
Yeah.
I want you to go beyond that and go, look, this is a theme for you, and you let yourself get hurt by it. And I see it happen with your brother, and we're dealing with him, but this is part of your deal. It's same with you not wanting to go to sleep right now. Let me put it this way to you. You go to sleep because you can do it, and I know you can, and I require you to. I see something about you you don't see, and that is that you're powerful, and I'm going to make it my business to teach you that you are. In other words, you and me and your power are going to become little friends. And I would start looking for areas in her life to point that out and to challenge her. And when she says, I'm scared about so-and-so, I'd say, well, I know you are, and yet I also know you can do it. And this afternoon when I get you after school, we're going to talk about whether you did it. And I'm going to say, see? One of the things I like to do with children who are afraid or frightened or vulnerable is I like to objectify fear for them. And I want to say that fear is like in there telling you crazy stuff. Fear says, it's going to happen, and it doesn't happen. Fear is a story that tells us this lie, and it's our job to push back on it. You know, when we drove to school this morning, I told you that this was going to happen and that you were going to handle this, and you did. I just kind of want us to look at that fear right now and go, no more. No more. You're going to learn, what's her name?
Penelope.
Penelope is strong, and you don't know that yet. In other words, I want to take that on as a mission. Okay? Good, multi-nuanced question.
There we go. Last one up here.
Great talk, great discussion, a lot of insight. The complicated part with her question is that little boy probably likes reading that book. Just kidding. Just kidding.
There are not enough pictures in it.
Yeah. My question kind of is dovetails to her is that, like, for example, if our kids went to school together, knowing that you get it, you read the book, we have the same philosophy, my question comes with, how do you deal with friends in your community who have, your kids are friends at school, and they're either helicoptering or they're doing things that contradict what we talk about today, and how, in a gentle and loving way, do we slip them this book, or do we, how do we have that conversation saying that, these are our beliefs, and this is sort of the framework that we work around to teach our kids how to be strong, but submit, and how to, and how to be empowered, et cetera, et cetera. But knowing that the influences around our children are other children.
All right, so up until that last statement, your question was, what is the most loving, powerful, life-giving way that we can relate to other parents as we see them trying to make these same judgment calls, and yet we have all these incredibly brilliant answers, and they don't. But then at the end, you sort of slipped in that notion of our kids are actually exposed to these other kids. All right, regarding the other parents, let's go to the theme, the dynamics of how do we act as a force of growth and life in the lives of other people. When we did the marriage conference last year, we talked a lot about the body of Christ and growing inside the body and in community and what it looks like to give to one another to grow. And that's an art form. I have a conference on how we grow that's basically about that dynamic. But a basic principle of growth, and this applies especially with friends, is no one can handle any more truth than they have a basics of love to hold it in. Let me try again. You can only withstand and hear and tolerate as much truth as you have love stored away. How about that? In other words, if I'm going to give you new truth, I have to have a real groundedness of trust, belonging, connection, closeness with you. You're going to have to feel like I get your world and love you just the way you are. All right? So that means I'm going to have a relationship with that person where they're going, man, it's driving me crazy because I'm having a helicopter all around all the time, and all I do is obsess about my kids, and I want to make sure that nothing bad ever happens to them, so I'm calling the principal every day, and I'm trying to make the world easy for them so they never really struggle. And you're going to have to say, I know, isn't it terrible when we watch our children struggle? Now, down the line, once that person feels heard, and like that you get their world from their perspective. Man, I have to do this in my job, and people supposedly come to me and ask for advice, and I still have to be this careful because, it's kind of like making eggs Benedict or hollandaise sauce. If you try to put too much melted butter in those egg yolks, it'll break and you'll have greasy scrambled eggs. Same thing happens with love and truth. If you put too much truth into not enough love, then it breaks and you have greasy scrambled eggs. That's the best way I could say it. Now, anyway, later on, once you've established more of a grounding with that person, you can say, I have spent so much of my parenting life feeling that same sort of tension about my kids and their suffering. And I heard a guy say something the other day that just really resonated with me. He was talking about how pain in itself, disappointment and loss in itself didn't harm children. And that there were actually ways in which we could engage our children in pain to where even if they do struggle, that they could really find some resolution, some metabolism of it. It was kind of cool. I don't know. As you were talking, I was just thinking that, friend. And they go, really? And they start to get interested. You're actually speaking their language now. And that may open up a door to be able to give them more resources that way. With your children, children are going to do a lot of comparing. And it's very important to create a real boundary around our family. Could you give me an example of a way in which a child might look at a different style of parenting in another family and then bring that home in a way that could cause some trouble? Could you help me with that one? Your friend behind
This
you.
is
will.
where the guy who's in charge of the limits has to
I'll finish
lovingly. I know
this
how
question.
hard it is when you've got questions coming in.
I'm going to
and-
finish this one, though.
I tried to do your stuff.
Yeah, I'm good. This is the last one.
Okay, so this is like current, and I think that's why it comes up. But so possibly our daughter is involved with some other girls, and we are not as a helicopter, but saying like they can figure it out. They're just 6-year-olds being 6-year-olds, and it's not really a big deal. But the helicopter mom, it's like, no, this is a big deal. Like, we need to have a family meeting, and we need to my daughter's in pain, and so we're trying to figure out what the boundary is and how to also maybe let the mom know, like, actually, this pain is kind of a good thing, and we can maybe come alongside them and help them, but also we want to kind of give the mom also some tools in letting them figure it out.
So the mom wants to helicopter y'all into the helicoptering too?
Yes.
So
So that's really the situation.
X plus 1.
Okay, X plus 3.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. All right, so just what would this mom do if you said, yeah, I don't really think we need a meeting. I think we're good.
She might go to the principal, honestly.
Good, well, they get paid for that.
And also too it's people that you really care about. We
Right.
and it's definitely not a battle. It's definitely not who's a better parent or anything like that. It's more we go to Push Ridge, and as we know that Push Ridge is very covenantal, and so we're all in this together, right? It's a community raising your child, and that's why we love the program, as we love the families there as well too. And so we all want to grow and learn from it, but at the same time, we don't want to make big deals out of absolutely everything. One of my daughters comes home and says, so-and-so didn't play with me today. The last thing I do is call their parents and say, hey, my poor daughter is so hurt by this situation. It's situations where we've learned with 4 young kids how to navigate through pain and having them figure things out, and things don't go your way all the time. You're not going to be picked.
Good.
And so, so I guess the question is that people you truly care about, how do you help them grow and sort of not let so much pressure and stress sort of build up, not just for them personally, but also for their child who you also really care about, and for your own kids too.
Right. All right, well, then I'm going to go back to where I was earlier. If they're not stepping on my toes too much, and they're not stepping on my children's toes too much, I'm going to look for a window to be able to bring them a little freedom. But you can't take that on too much. Because, parental anxiety, as I started off saying, this psychological legalism, parental anxiety is epidemic in our culture. And we're not going to be able to save everybody from it. But I think that as in the closeness you have, you ought to be able to have an opportunity at some point to say, here's a good podcast or something that helped us about it.
An easy scenario is you're at the playground, your son and another kid, they bump and they both fall down, and then, by the parent who you don't have a relationship, gets all riled up, you kind of just shrug them off and life goes on. That's an easy one.
Yeah, right.
But
The
complicated
people who are
one is-
closer, it's harder.
Exactly, I think that's a little more complicated.
Yeah.
than that.
All right, I'm going to close this in prayer.
Do it.
And we start at 8:30.
Start at 8:30, and if you have children in childcare, please go get them now after the prayer.
Yeah. Father, we get to be your kids. We get to talk about the ways in which you've made us and our children, ways that not only reflect wisdom, ways that bring life, ways that help us learn about love and about strength and all that, but we also get to learn about how you have built in a system to love us and create even more life in the midst of our failure. We are your children, and yet even more so, we are your redeemed. And so are our children redeemed. I pray, Father, I have felt your presence here tonight as you've been so much in our midst. And I pray that you would fill the lives of these families as they try to apply these things and grow in these things, that you, as their maker and redeemer, would just infuse their families more and more. Thank you for this evening. Thank you for our time. Bless us for this evening and be with us again in the morning. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you all.